Welcome, everyone. This is the regular meeting of the Board of Directors for January 30th. And Deborah, if you could call the meeting to order, please. I'm sorry, if you could do the roll call, please.
Absolutely. I apologize for any stuttering of the roll call part, but Hamaji.
Here.
That's you. I'm sorry. That was okay.
Say here.
Oh, here. I'm sorry. I'm trying to follow this.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Hines.
Here.
Topper.
Here.
Hurt.
Here.
Bentley.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Lair.
Here.
Walker.
Here.
Yang.
Here.
And Matheson.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Just two announcements. As you can tell, Deborah Rose is going to be joining us remotely today. And as far as the agenda, we'll be addressing item 11D first under new business. So please make that note. Right now, does anybody have any changes to the minutes from the December 5th meeting?
No.
Okay, seeing none, we'll say they're approved. And Cindy Silva, could we get an update from the Walnut Creek?
Welcome back.
Oh, thank you. I've missed you all. Good morning. I'm Cindy Silva, and I'm a member of the Walnut Creek City Council, and I have the honor this year of serving as liaison between the city and the Golden Rain Foundation and Rossmore. So thank you for having me back this morning. I realize Happy New Year is in order, although it is almost the last day of January. So you need to have your meetings at the beginning of January, and then it wouldn't be so untimely. I suspect you haven't had any updates since maybe November from the city because of the holidays. So I hope the holidays were well for all of you. I will start out with some of the, to address some of the questions that may have arisen because of the Southern California wildfires. We have had numerous questions from residents of the city of how well prepared are we, et cetera. And I want to assure you on behalf of the city and the city manager that we are well prepared and have a full emergency plan. It can always be better and it can always be practiced. I do want to commend the Rossmore community and the EPO organization for sponsoring the Wildfire Town Hall. I had an opportunity to attend it a couple of weeks ago. I learned a lot and was glad to hear about the answers to some of the questions that came from Consolidated Fire District and your management and the city about entrances, exits, and how to be prepared. I particularly liked the section on how to be prepared for your pets, because all of us love our pets, and if we're not prepared for not only for ourselves, but our pets, we're going to have a problem when emergency does arise. So that's a good reminder. And we will be continuing to look at, to ensure that the city is well prepared to work with Rossmore as well as all the other neighborhoods in the community in case of a disaster such as a wildfire. But there are other types of disasters that we experience in this state, including earthquakes. And so with those we cannot see coming. They just happened. So we always still have to be mindful of that. So thank you again to what you've been doing to prepare the community for disasters, in particular those wildfires. If I talk about wildfires and disasters, the next question always is, well, what about public safety? And so we just received our 2024 crime report, and it also covered the fourth quarter. So hot off the presses. We have some good news on the public safety front. The monthly average crime rate for 2024 has dropped, or at least it was the same, lower at the same level as it was in 2023, which both those years are below what we were experiencing in 2021, 2022, and 2020. So that is good news. Property crime went up slightly. Property crime is primarily what occurs in the business district. And so we have a number of activities going on for that. It's not egregious and it's still lower. The property crime rate is still lower than it was during COVID. but we can always do better there. We're looking forward to some of the changes that are happening because of the passage of Prop 36 by California voters that will make it will allow local law enforcement to better address the repeat offenders related to property crimes and what was happening across cities and across counties. There were some constraints in the law that are now being removed. And it will take a while to see the change, how it goes and what needs to be done. The other thing is on the property crime front, the city has renewed its agreement with Broadway Plaza to jointly fund a police officer presence at Broadway Plaza during daylight hours and open hours. It doesn't mean that they're exclusively there and they would stand there and watch a crime occur across the street and outside Broadway Plaza, but it does help to secure better safety there. And the police officer frequently is working with the local retailers on how they can best address property crime, the potential for it. One of the most important things related to property crime in retail is that they need to report the crime. There's a tendency to say, I'm not going to report it because nothing's going to happen anyway. But if we don't know it's happening and where it's happening, we cannot work with those local retailers to help prevent the property crime. Emergency preparedness and public safety are two of the City Council's top priorities. And we establish our council priorities every 2 years, and we're about to do that in February. On February 11th, we will be meeting for about a half day to discuss what our council priorities would be for the coming 2 years. Currently, they, in addition to public safety and social wellness and other safety issues, our priorities include environmental sustainability and climate action, diversity, equity, and inclusion, economic development and job creation, and parks and other infrastructure improvements. So I have some updates on those, but we will be making our priorities again on February 11th, and any input, if you have suggestions, just email mayor@walnut-creek.org and it will reach all of us, including city staff. One of our priorities has been to address the rising unaffordability levels of housing in the community and across the state and across the nation. And we were thrilled to celebrate the grand opening of Hope Village just outside of Rossmore at the back of the parking lot for Grace Presbyterian Church. They are just starting to tenant those properties. It is a 6-cottage community, and each cottage is about 250 square feet, so they're designed for one person. And a lot of those people will be seniors and who are just coming out of homelessness. Hope Village also provides wraparound services for those lower income individuals. And it's the first of its kind in Contra Costa County, so we're very proud of that. And it's a partnership between Hope Solutions, which is a nonprofit that works in the affordable housing arena, the faith community, Grace Presbyterian Church in this case, and also builders. And so the foundations are built on site, but the rest of those units were built in a manufacturing environment. So all of the labor was done there, and then they were shipped on trucks here and laid and attached to the foundations. So we're looking forward to pursuing more of those types of opportunities in the near future. Speaking of homelessness, it is the winter, and during the winter we try to assist those who are living outside. And so we've had a partnership for almost 10 years with the National Guard Armory and Trinity Center to run a winter nights shelter at the National Guard Armory, which is behind the library and Civic Park, in case you don't know where the Armory is. Unfortunately, it has been delayed in opening because whenever the Guard is deployed, they have to be able to use their facility, and it can't be used for the winter night shelter, and the Guard was deployed for the Southern California Flyers. So as soon as that deployment is addressed, then the winter night shelter will open for this year. So some updates on infrastructure, because some of it is going on near the entrance to Rossmore. Soon you will see construction begin on Tice Valley ball fields for lighting for those fields so that they can be used in the evenings and during non-sunny hours. And so that is happening starting soon. In addition, the construction on all-weather ball fields at Heather Farm Park will be starting soon after that. So with those two fields will be out of commission, so the lighting at the Tice Valley Park will help to provide more ball field space for youth in particular. The other thing is we are well in the design phase for the new aquatic center and community center at Heather Farm Park. And that will take about 6 months, and then we'll go into the construction bidding phase. And then once we've selected the construction company, it's just like what happens up here with your facilities. Then we will be going into construction phases, ideally in the beginning of 2026 and to be concluded in 2027. And these major infrastructure projects, the ball field lights, the all-weather turf, and the Heather Farm improvements with the pool facility and the community center are really being funded primarily from the sales tax proceeds from Measure O, which was approved by the voters a little over 2 years ago. So thank you to all of you. I will also mention that you might have noticed that downtown streets were ripped up for East Bay Mud and Central Sanitary District improvements for almost 2 years. That work has concluded. It also was finished with some improvements to sidewalks and a crosswalk that connects in front of the Leisure Center that looks like a piano keyboard. And now that the sidewalks are returned to normal and the parking is back, we will be able to have conversations with local restaurants downtown about whether they want to return to outdoor dining or not. Speaking of dining, I noticed, I do live near Rossmore, but I noticed that we've had some additions in the restaurant category at the Rossmore Shopping Center. It looks like all of the food groups are covered: pizza, tacos, barbecue, yogurt, and cookies. So it's a much better array of alternatives than just the coffee cup. So the same kind of activity is happening in our neighborhood shopping centers around the city, which is good, but you will see some comings and goings because, as always happens, some things work out and other things come in. I will say that the city is, for those of you who are registered architects, if you're watching, if you're in the audience or watching, we are seeking a registered architect to join our Design Review Commission. And so information on that position can be found on the city's website. We are also seeking another member to join our Board of Appeals. This is a board that only convenes if a builder has received a decision from the Planning and Building Department that the builder doesn't like, and it appeals the decision of the Building Department. And these individuals are pretty much steeped and experienced in how to read the municipal code and the building code and to weigh in as a decision as to whether the building department is right or the builder is right. So if you're interested in either the Design Review Commission seat or the builder's Building Appeals Board position, go online and apply. There's a lot going on now. On a happier note, at the Leisure Center for the Arts, from February 9th to March 12th, Center Rep will be presenting I have to read these words. The production is called Froggy, and it's not about frogs. It is the world premiere of a graphic novel noir thriller. So if you like thrillers and you know what graphic novels are, it might be for you. Also at the Leisure Center is the Bedford Gallery, and the current show is called Stitched, and it's about contemporary embroidery. And go to see it because you can't believe what people can do with embroidery. Excuse my voice. And the spring headliners at the Leisure Center include Mandy Patinkin, as well as Dance Theater Company of Harlem, so tickets are available for those. And I will say once again, thank you for all that you do for your community and for the Walnut Creek community at large. We work together and we make things better for our residents. So thank you very much, and thank you for the glass of water. and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Cindy, for a very thorough report that included everything
Are
we
we
could
done
ever
now? Can we all
possibly
go
want to
home?
know. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Cindy? Dwight?
So Cindy, I know that you're plugged into many different things within the community, and one of the board goals that we have is water conservation. And I know that Central San is working on some recycled water efforts in order to comply with some state regulations. And I'm wondering if the city is taking a stand or is supporting that, or is that on your agenda?
We haven't taken a stand on that because we're not in the water business, nor are we in the recycled water business, but we'll be talking about it as part of our priorities. I'm sure it will come up because as the regulations change, particularly with the Bay Area BCDC, Bay Conservation and Development, when those regulations change, they sometimes make it easier or harder to get water. So,
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I do.
James? Oh, Mary.
Thanks. You were talking about the revisions and the additions of the ballparks. Is the city going to support any synthetic turf for any of those ballparks?
I'm sorry. What we're doing is, I think you're asking about all-weather turf. Okay. 2 of the ball fields at Heather Farm Park, there are 6 ball fields at Heather Farm. 2 of them, the 2 that are at the front, are 20 years old and they're wearing out, and we're going to replace them with all-weather turf.
And welcome back. We're glad you're here.
Oh, thank you. And did you have a question? So thank you so much again. I look
Yes,
forward
thank
to
you. We're
hearing
glad to
some-
have you back.
You have some hot items on your agenda today. I look forward to hearing.
All right, we're going to move on to item number 5, the financial status report and detailed financial. And Todd Arterburn, if you could give us an update on that.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. So you'll probably notice there isn't a lot of detailed financials in this packet today. A couple things. One, as we'll get into later in the agenda, where we are with the launch of NetSuite. Obviously, looking at, I'd say stepping back a little bit, producing year-end statements are a little bit different than the monthly closes, right? There's a lot that goes into monthly closes in terms of going through accruals. And so even though we are inundated with NetSuite in my team, I also think it's very prudent to put out detailed financials. And so rushing into a year-end financial package that was going to have a lot of changes compared to a normal monthly cycle, I think it's prudent and wise versus putting out preliminary statements that may have a lot of adjustments to them. So in that sense, from you saw from my memo that I put in the packet, there was a decision made to delay year-end financial reviews until the February board meeting because they're just going to be more complete, they're going to be more accurate, and we're not rushing, And so obviously that's, I think, just proper business management. And matter of fact, even without NetSuite, I would suggest that we take a look at the calendar for next year and maybe, even though we skip the December meeting, be able to use the issue November financials like normally, and then actually still get onto a cycle where we're looking at year-end financials in February. So, and like I said, we'll get into the NetSuite update a little bit later. Obviously, my team, we still produced all the mutual financials on time and got all those year-end ones out, but we wanted to make sure that GRF and MOD and the trust financials are accurate, right? So there was a decision made to delay them until next month. Certainly, I think it serves the community and serves the board better to have, better detailed numbers. So that's kind of the status for this month. Along with that, and what I've also been sharing with all the mutuals, we are producing a very detailed fiscal calendar that's going to really take away any surprises or when things are coming out and deliverable from my group, from audits to the tentative budget schedule to even the financial closes, and put on things if there was a board agenda item. So you'll be seeing that here pretty quickly for kind of an rolling 18-month look at the fiscal calendar. So that's what I have to report today. However, we'll get into the NetSuite thing a little bit later in the agenda. So any questions?
Any questions for Todd at this point? Okay, thank you.
Great.
Thank
Thanks,
you very
everyone.
much, Todd. Okay, well, we're going to move to item number 6, the general manager's report. Jeff?
Good morning and Happy New Year. This is our first meeting of 2025, and we have quite a meeting ahead of you, so I'll try and be brief. One of the items on the agenda today is a report out from the Marketing Task Force, and they have a few items for your consideration. So kind of building off of that, I thought it'd be interesting to look at some of the original marketing material that the community had when it was first under construction. Rossmore this year will be turning 65. So it was interesting to read. There had quite a few different slogans that were in place back then, and thinking, are some of these still relevant today? Some of them were America's finest adult community, Rossmore Walnut Creek for the young at heart, a new world of living, Rossmore Walnut Creek, the full life adult community, Rossmore Walnut Creek, if you'd like to spend more time at the country club, why not live there? A place to know joy, become a part of it as it becomes a part of you, Rossmore Walnut Creek. So, and there's a few others, but one of the things you'll notice is they use the term Rossmore Walnut Creek in just about every one of those, and that's going to be a topic that the task force is going to bring to you today as well. As part of this report, also wanted to look forward a little bit and some of the things that are ahead for 2025. One of the main projects that is a company-wide goal is the implementation of NetSuite, and we are underway with that. And Todd will be giving an update on that soon. You should be having the pickleball project come to a decision point before you as we continue to finalize permits and then seek bids and bring that to you for consideration and moving forward. We'll be having a report out in a community town hall on the food and beverage study that has been going on. So we will see the next phase of that. We are working with all of the mutuals on a very important document that probably won't be forward-facing a lot, but is the update of the management agreement that Golden Rain Foundation has with each of the participating mutuals. And that is just a critical document for the mutuals and GRF. And as talked about at the beginning, we'll be looking forward to reporting out from the Marketing Task Force in different directions that may take us. So a lot is ahead to look forward to this year. One of the things that we also will see is some good stability in our employee base this year. We had some transactions over the last few months, but we did also have an orientation for our new employees yesterday. We had about 15 employees attend that new orientation, and it's just exciting to see. We had a couple of carpenters there, and that's been a topic that we've talked to you about. We had two of our fitness trainers there. We had front desk at the Rossmore News, and just about every different department was represented with some new faces. So we'll see a lot of services being delivered with those new folks. That's about it. If there's any questions on that.
Any questions for Jeff? Okay, thank you, Jeff. Now we'll move to Residents Forum. And Maxine, do we have any in-person resident, or I'm sorry, Deborah, can you give us
Residents have up to 2 minutes to address the board. The board does not directly answer questions posed by speakers during the Residents Forum, but it does hear the viewpoints and ideas presented, and members do consider them as they act during the meeting. Speakers must conduct themselves with proper decorum consistent with community standards that would not be offensive to a reasonable person, as determined at the sole discretion of the GRF board. Participants may not engage in personal attacks, threats of any kind, or any other disruptive behavior. Speakers violating these rules may be expelled from the meeting and precluded from speaking at future meetings, as determined by the board. In-person forum instructions. Complete the Residents Forum slip and then give your slip to the board secretary. Copies of handouts or notes should also be given to the board secretary. Zoom forum instructions. If you wish to address the board, use the raise hand feature or press star 9 if connecting via phone audio only. Residents are welcome to type their comment in the Q&A chat feature located on the control panel of Zoom at the start of the meeting and up until the start of the residents forum. Please wait your turn, and once unmuted, state your full name and Rossmore address. Once the residents forum has begun, additional resident comments will not be considered.
Okay, we request that I'll read the next speaker and the speaker after that so we can have a smooth transition. So please, the speaker should come up to the microphone and speak directly into the microphone. It's a little hard to hear today. And the next person should just stand aside. So let's start with Nicholas Sten and then Pamela Liang. Is Pamela here? Oh, so would you go stand next to him so you'll be ready to speak when he's done? Thank you, Pam. Please speak directly into the microphone.
Good morning. Nicholas Sten from Leisure Lane. I'm here to talk about the Rossmore exit. Specifically, I'm going to refer to the editorial last week by Amy. I can't pronounce her last name. Amy basically wrote that we should not waste $4 million on a loan for pickleball when we should be spending money on creating more exits. The editorial staff responded as follows. To clarify, while Rossmore has only one open exit, there are 9 alternative emergency access points. I read this, the Emergency Operations Plan, 130 some odd pages, because this is referenced in the editorial by the editorial staff. And it further references Appendix H, which I read. And if you guys haven't read it, you should. The editor's response, I've spoken with a few people who've read the paper and the editor's response, and they found it comforting because they believe there are other options to get out of here. There are none. These are not exits. Read the appendix. I'll read it. There are 9 alternative emergency access points around Rossmore. These alternative access points are not intended to be used by, or are intended to be used by civil authorities to bring resources into Rossmore. These access points are not, in bold letters, to be used as evacuation routes.
That is time.
Most of them are unimproved roads that may be inaccessible.
Okay.
These
Nick, you've reached the 2 minutes. Thank you.
you guys should read this, because there's a lot of people not getting out of here. 2 minutes is not a long time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Pamela Liang, followed by Chen Xiao.
Hi, my name is Pamela. I'm live at the Gray Eagle, and thank you for your time. And I regret to bring the same room reservation issue to you.
Sorry, Pam, could you give us your address, your full address?
3026 Gray Eagle Drive.
Thank you.
So I'm representing Chinese Community Church Club, AKA R4C. And our room reservation request for MPR1 on Wednesday afternoon in 2025 was initially booked, but late canceled due to an issue with no history. To provide some background, after my presentation at GRF meeting on July 24 last year, a recurring booking contract for NPR1 was issued to R4C. And this year, we submitted our reservation and along with the other 6 room requests. However, by end of 2024, we only received 3 contracts. And we especially mentioned that we need NPR1 for our Wednesday Bible study. So when I follow up the inquiry with these remaining contracts, and Mr. Z denying for a week didn't reply my email. So subsequently, I reached out to GRF board, and I was told there was 4 contracts already issued to me, but I only received 3. So surprisingly, next day I received an email from reservation desk. Megan said, "Oh, I need to apologize to you, and we did create a contract for you, but it has to be canceled because there's no history." So
That is time.
It's not very clear what
Thank
means
you.
history.
That is time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chin, and then followed by Dan Ring.
My name is Chin Xiao, 2605 Second Indian. I'm the pastor of the Rossmore Chinese Church, and I come here to request the NPR1 room is for our Bible study, and it's been issued last year, and we don't understand why it's been canceled this year because we have historical data. And we appreciate you give us a 3 contract for Sunday worship and Friday, Saturday Bible study. However, our church is growing. We have a Mandarin group as official language, but now Cantonese group also join us. So our church is growing. We definitely need more room for Bible study, especially Pamela just mentioned NPR1 room in afternoon. And last year we have a contract, and we don't understand why it's been canceled this year. So I humbly request we state it, make sure we have a same contract as last year. Thank you.
Thank you. After Dan, we have Tom Debley.
Good morning. My name is Dan Ring. I live at 2133 Pine Knoll Drive, number 4. I'm speaking to you today as a representative of the Rossmore Activities Council. The Rossmore Activities Council primary goal is to provide a forum where club representatives can come together and discuss common interests. The Activities Council also supports areas of needs within the community and assist in funding the projects. One of the biggest issues facing our clubs here at Rossmore today is the liquor license issue that has come up within the last 3 to 6 months. It is my understanding that a liquor license would be required for all club events not held at Creekside that serve alcoholic beverages, and money or consideration is charged for that event. In addition, the club would need to be a 501c organization, of which many of our clubs are not. The Activities Council had a very good meeting last week with Leanne and Jeff to discuss this problem. The Activities Council is specifically working on expanding GRF's current liquor license to cover multiple buildings in Rossmore. Leanne and Jeff assure us that they are aware of this issue and are working on a solution. And we are scheduled to meet again with them in the upcoming weeks. I am very happy to see this item is on your agenda today. I hope that this is something that the board can move on quickly, as this is an important issue to all the clubs here at Rossmore. I also wanted to let all the clubs here at Rossmore know that the Activities Council is aware of this issue and is working with GRF to come up with a solution. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Our last speaker is Tom Debley. Oh, Susan Hildreth. I'm sorry.
No, oh, do you have my slip? I did submit it.
I did see. I'm sorry. No, it's here, honey. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And Susan, I apologize. Susan was first. It got stuck underneath other papers. Okay. You get to finish this up. So sorry, Susan.
Okay.
I'm Tom Debley, 3 24 Ptarmigan, number 3C. I'm one of the almost 500 signatories so far to the petition that you continue publishing political commentary in the Rossmore News. The reason why I've signed it, polling by the State Policy Network shows that more than 1 in 2 Americans now stay quiet in political conversation. In short, most Americans are self-censoring to avoid potential disagreements, adding to the silence that is casting a dark shadow, I believe, across America. David Winston, a Republican political strategist, asks, what happens when people stop talking to one another about what matters to them and the country? His answer? That's when democracy dies, not in darkness, but in silence. As Marion Buddy, the Episcopal Bishop of Washington, D.C., recently said in her call for unity and compassion, in public discourse, honoring each other's dignity means choosing to respectfully debate across our differences and, whenever possible, to seek common ground. Silence seeks not common ground, but more divisiveness. Silence is no substitute for civility. So I plead with you to not join the growing national movement of casting a pall of silence over America. If you do, you will merely add to the silence, not promote civility. Thank you.
Susan Hildreth.
Good morning. I am Susan Hildreth, and I live at 2229 Ptarmigan Drive, number 1. I'm speaking in my capacity as the president of the Democrats of Rossmore. The Board of the Democrats of Rossmore passed a resolution in 2024 against the suspension of political columns in the Rossmore News. The GRF board has now received a petition from over 400 residents requesting that you can reconsider your decision to eliminate the political columns. The columns were reviewed in detail over at least a year ago, and the solution of having the political columns in a rotating monthly sequence was working well and I hope could be reinstated. The column frequency should address concerns re staff time for fact-checking. If there are concerns re legal liability in publishing the columns, please consider sharing that information with residents so we can better understand your decision on this matter. The inclusion of the columns in the Rossmore News does not instigate political strife in our community. Sadly, that strife is endemic in our society during this difficult period. So please reconsider your decision on eliminating the columns. Thank you.
Thank you to all our speakers. Deborah, do we have anybody on Zoom?
Yes, we do. We have 2 speakers, and I am unmuting Barry Bryan. Barry, please state your full name and your Rossmore address.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Barry Bryan from 3874 Terra Granada Drive, 3C. Ann Matola has rightly said that you cannot manage what you do not measure. And yet, there does not appear to be any user feedback system that measures how well the janitorial and AV staff are at getting user-requested setups right the first time. A recent announcement that setup times are being reduced will exacerbate this problem. Case in point, my wife and I were asked to perform at a recent event in Fireside. We were one of about 8 groups that were performing over the course of the program. The AV support person came in 15 minutes before the event. He was besieged by most, if not all, of the performing groups with their setup needs. He barely had enough time to give performers their equipment. There was no time to test out the equipment. While most of the audience heard my wife and I harmonizing, they could not hear the piano accompaniment because the piano amplification through the system failed. There was just insufficient time to test it. Your system to measure whether janitorial and AV setups are right the first time and in time for the program start is either inadequate or non-existent. With such a system, you would know beforehand when some setups would require more time to get right. The Rossmore Life Council would be happy to improve or implement such a system in cooperation with or separate from your staff. To ignore improving or installing such a system risks increased stress on your staff that could cause increased staff turnover and increased resident dissatisfaction. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have handle name Mary Ann Clark. I'm unmuting you. Please state your full name and Rossmore address.
Good morning. My name is Mary Ann Clark, and I live at 1780 Stanley Dollar Drive, 2A. Civilized debate is vital to democracy. If residents are not allowed the opportunity to express opposing views in this community, especially at this critical time in our history, we have failed as Americans. Stifling free speech and curtailing debate is unpatriotic and borders on bullying behavior. I might add that we residents are not the ones who have failed, but is you, the board and your staff, who have failed us. As Dwight Walker told us recently, the realtors don't like to see protests in Rossmore. The GRF board and staff of the Rossmore News is doing their bidding. Their profits seem to supersede the building of community by the residents of Rossmore. We want to be able to exercise free speech without fear of being infantilized by the GRF board and Rossmore News. I want to remind you that you work for us, not the other way around. I have spoken to others, and we feel that the civility code and demonstration policy drafted by the GRF board that were imposed upon our community is a way of stifling criticism of some of their unwise decisions, such as attempting the sell-off and development of land in Rossmore and micromanaging demonstrations. The 2-minute limit in residence forum is another form of squelching voices. Residents should be allowed to exercise civilized free speech. And I might add that I think that the marketing task force is completely unnecessary. Rossmore sells itself. One of the problems that Rossmore is having right now is this top-down exercise.
That is your time.
That is occurring in Rossmore. People are aware of what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you to all the speakers.
Thank you, speakers. We do appreciate your opinions, and we do note them. Now I'd like to move on to item number 8, and that's the resident member committee reports. I'm sorry. Mr. Gallagher. No, he's not until new business. We'll start with the Aquatics and Fitness Advisory Committee. Barry Devine, are you? There's Barry. Thank you. Barry is the chair of that committee. Welcome, Barry.
Thank you for the welcome and wish you all a good day. The Aquatics and Fitness Advisory Committee met on January 9 for the first time this year. All members were able to be present, and I've got a few comments to share with you. First of all, we're all very pleased that the Tice Creek Pool opened earlier than originally scheduled. The demand was met very quickly. The Tice Creek resurfacing in the pool is currently scheduled for later in the year of 2025, probably October, November. Details yet to be finalized. And the skylight replacement, which was mentioned previously, is targeted for earlier in 2026. The Tice Creek air handler control, whatever that is, obviously I made a comment on that before, it works with meeting regulations about the environment, as well as managing the actual the atmosphere when you've got swimming pools and hot tubs all affecting the circulation of the air in the community there. Staffing changes are being resolved with additional new personnel and some specialized training for those who are there longer but to be able to provide special leading, particularly in the yoga field, which is in high demand. Jackie Carlisle, who's managing the pool and gym, has reported adjusting schedules of the staff so that larger classes can be assigned to the larger spaces. And this is not always easy to do because we don't necessarily get the registration, which indicates how large the group is going to be when it's time to implement. The trainers themselves are being scheduled to spend time on the floor providing demonstrations and safety guidance and to do things that prevent accidents happening. There's a new magnetic whiteboard placed right near the entry to the gym where the trainers who are on duty by a photograph and their name are identified so that they can be consulted for any questions that the residents might have, and for the actual trainers, if they observe potential use of the equipment which might lead to an injury, they can give some counsel on that regard. The gymnasium usage observation reports that more female usage of fitness, free weights, and equipment might be attributed to some of this exercise using the staff to become counselors, if you will. And this is in addition to the free group orientations, which have been introduced to show residents how to safely use gym equipment and use it safely to prevent the likelihood of injury. Management met with club leaders to confirm the 2025 schedules and space allocations. I made a count on my own and counted 16 different clubs that use that Tice Creek facility. So it's quite well used, but it takes some management, particularly in terms of room reservations and assignment and the size of the room, the number of people who are going to be attending and so on. Quite a few variables to manage there. There's been some new fitness equipment purchased, some to replace equipment that was pretty well worn, and a couple of others where a popular piece of equipment tends to be a holdup, and so now we have multiple units to use. Over 700 new resident users were measured in the last 2 months, and as has happened before, Mondays are still the busiest day, with 9 a.m. being the busiest time. Perhaps the lack of, or the reduction in demand for personal training is due to some of this staffing reassignment that I mentioned a moment ago. We're very pleased that Mary Lou Thompson on the committee has kindly agreed to continue selecting residents for the Wall of Fame, which is a recognition of residents of a mature age who use the facilities regularly and who therefore could be motivators for other residents in our community at large. I think that's all I have to say, unless there are any questions you'd like to advance.
Thank you, Barry. That was a great report. Does anybody have any questions for Barry?
Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. Next, we'll hear from the Finance Committee. Dan Ring is the chair of the Finance Committee.
Morning. The Finance Committee had a short meeting on Tuesday before we lost power, and I mean that literally, not figuratively. As Todd stated, the December 2024 financial statements were not available due to several reasons. They would be reviewed during the February Finance Committee meeting. We discussed several items but postponed any decisions until more information becomes available in February. We did discuss the 2023 MTF versus the 2024 MTF. In 2023, total units sold were 558, of which 428 of them generated revenue of $5,375,000. In 2024, total units sold were 496, of which 391 of them generated revenue of $5,186,500, which is a decrease of $188,500. We are in the process of trying to obtain details to support the variance between the number of units sold versus the number of units that pay the MTF. Todd assures us that by the next 30 to 45 days, we should have a detailed listing of what makes up those variances. He states he's been busy, hasn't been able to get to it, only because of NetSuite, so nothing important. So we should have something soon, because it is very important. That's a very large percentage of the sales that are not they don't pay the MTF, which could be big money. We also discussed several items pertaining to these numbers. We discussed raising the MTF fee from $13,000 to $15,000. Any increase of that would not be effective for 4 to 6 months. We also discussed what number of units to be used as a projection for the 2025 capital projects. The Finance Committee previously recommended 375. A discussion occurred about that number being too conservative, and that the number should be 385 to 400. Again, no decision was made. We also discussed the facilities usage fee, or the FUF fee. In 2024, that amount was approximately $140,000. The discussion was whether to continue to include that amount as part of operations, or if the FUF revenue should be included as part of the capital fund. Any change in the reporting of the FUF fee would not be effective until January 1, 2026, because it's already in the 2025 operating budget. Again, we're waiting for more final numbers to get all this information, and decisions will be made in February. As a final note, I will be in Mexico on the golf trip and will miss the February meeting. Perfect timing. Vice Chair Alice Lau will lead the Finance Committee meeting in my absence, and Adrian Bryan, who's the past chairman, will report to the GRF board in February. Questions?
Thank you, Dan. We all look forward to further analysis of that MTF report and trends, that type of thing. Does anybody have any questions for Dan? Dwight?
So I was president for 3 years of the GRF board, as Leanne is now. And as such, the president of the board signs off on every MTF transfer and any exemptions that are made. And in fact, the monthly MTF report that the board receives, as well as the Finance Committee receives, lists those exemptions. So that work is already there.
The report we get does not list any exemptions. It just says number of units sold.
It's at the bottom of the report, lists all the exemptions. The other thing is in the Finance Committee report, it noted that generational changes in ownership do not generate MTFs, and that is not correct. The policy states that inheritances by spouses or domestic partners are exempt, but children do have a year to resell the property as long as they don't occupy it, but they are subject to MTF if they occupy it. So there needs to be some good information that gets passed along, especially to the public, about how MTFs are generating revenue and are being enforced in accordance with the policy.
And this will be part of our report that we do with Finance in February to go over those exemptions, the current policy, and how it is applied. So we'll be providing that detail.
I encourage board members to attend that meeting in February because it's going to be very informative. Thank you. Any other questions for Dan? Okay, thank you, Dan. Moving on to the Golf Advisory Board, Burke Ferrari, the chair of that board.
At the Golf Advisory Committee meeting this month, the final results for 2024 were not available, so I thought I'd just briefly mention them. The number of rounds played in 2024, 69,400 versus 68,700 in 2023, so basically flat. The amount of revenue raised on the course through green fees and on the courses, 1,468,000 versus 1,387,000, so a slight increase there. And the amount of cash raised in the golf shop, 490,000 versus 472 in the prior year. So it's slightly more, but not really spectacular. One other item that we discussed at the January meeting was the tea time reservation system. There had been a proposal from a resident at the November meeting to change the system, and it occurred to me that the tea time reservation system is somewhat similar to the room reservation issue that's currently being discussed, in that the supply of assets in the case of the room reservation system, which is the rooms and the times available, is similar to the assets for the tea time reservation, because there's only a limited number of tea times available. And at certain times, the demand for times and for rooms exceeds the supply, which causes frustration, and that's what we've seen today. So I thought I would discuss today how the tea time reservation system works. But it looks like the agenda today is extremely full. So I was thinking I could just put that off until next month, and it's not time sensitive. So if there are any other questions.
Any questions for Burke? I thank you very much, Burke. We greatly appreciate it. And February that'll be interesting to hear about. I just want to let residents know that if you're interested in the statistics from the Fitness and Aquatics Committee and the Golf Committee, those items are on their agendas, which are found on rossmore.com. Now we'll move on to board committee reports, and we'll start with planning. Cheryl?
So I have nothing official to report. We have items that are on the agenda today, which will follow the machinery and equipment budget and also the first go-round on the capital project budget. We're looking forward to getting more robust numbers as we finalize some of the year-end results and also get additional information on the MTF. So we have the ability to do a longer range planning for the planning committee. The other thing that happened is that we usually have planning committee after the marketing task force. Due to some scheduling issues, that was not the case. So marketing has some items that they want the board to consider, and I want to get a presentation from Dwight on those items. Thanks.
Well, I'm not going to give you a presentation, Ann will, but let me give you some introductory remarks. So Cheryl is exactly right. The marketing task force met on February 11th after the planning committee meeting and made a number of recommendations for the board to consider. The task force has been working on some essential building blocks that are the foundation of marketing tools going forward. The task force wants to receive feedback and approval on several of these building blocks before moving forward. Ann will be providing more in-depth information, but those things being considered are a consistent use of a brand name, Rossmore Walnut Creek, not to give away Ann's presentation, a marketing mission statement, and a marketing vision statement. With the board's approval of these items, then the task force can move forward to address the next level of building blocks. That is marketing values and target audiences. I'd also like to inform the board that the task force is engaging in some data collection with a survey of some recent home buyers to assist in identifying driving forces in their buying decision-making. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ann Peterson, who is valuable to our task force and all that we do.
Thank you, Dwight. So I want to talk a little bit about what the marketing task force has done in order to start to build out that brand strategy. And it starts with a mission statement. This mission statement is explaining why our organization exists, why Rossmore exists in the first place. It is a present day look at what we are trying to accomplish. Whereas the vision statement is explaining where we expect to go in the future, what we would like Rossmore to become, not now, but a year, 2 years, as many as 10 years down the road. The statement values is what our set of behaviors are, what it is that we are building into that mission and vision statement, what we expect are the values inside Rossmore. If you look at something like Airbnb, Their statement of values are things like champion the mission, be a host, embrace the adventure. So it's really about trying to find out what the values are here in Rossmore. Target audience, this is a big one. Who are you trying to market Rossmore to? It's about being able to strategically and specifically define what that target audience is so that it helps us really stay focused when we are trying to determine what our marketing plan is. And we've already started to identify that we have many target audiences. It's not just the prospective buyers that are coming in, it's also our existing residents. It's staff, it's the vendors we work with. One of the ones that kind of surprised us, it's the adult children who are helping their parents find homes in here. So we're learning how to figure out what those target audiences are so that we can direct our marketing plan to and around them. The analogy that we have is that what you're essentially doing with your brand is building first the trunk of your tree. That's where your mission, your vision, and your values are. And then what's going to happen is your marketing plan and your brand strategy is going to branch out from there. So the first thing that the marketing task force has done is draft a mission statement and a vision statement. Here's the mission statement. To serve our active adult community in a welcoming and safe residential environment where abundant amenities, idyllic natural beauty, enriching activities, and a low-maintenance lifestyle provide peace of mind and the freedom to live fully. The vision statement, which is again looking towards the future, to be the leading active adult community in the Bay Area, offering residents a dynamic and inclusive lifestyle, surrounded by nature, where every day is an opportunity for adventure, friendship, and personal growth. Part of what is necessary in deciding what your mission and your vision is then to also understand better what your brand is. And we have a real problem in Rossmore. We've talked a lot about this. We have a lot of different identities. People know us as Rossmore, Rossmore Walnut Creek, Golden Rain Foundation, all 22 of the mutuals. And so what the task force has talked about is really needing to establish one brand by which everything operates. And they came up with Rossmore Walnut Creek. We actually use this already in a lot of ways. All of our business cards, the signs you see on the buses, even our website already say Rossmore Walnut Creek. We've been identifying like that for quite some time. There are some ways that we can rebrand with this name change that would be no cost or even low cost changes. Things like staff could change the voice messages on the phones. We could change our email signatures so it just says Rossmore Walnut Creek and no longer says Golden Rain Foundation. Our internal and even some of our external communication, like job postings, could say Rossmore Walnut Creek instead of Golden Rain Foundation. It is kind of hard to bring somebody into Rossmore as a new employee when you're saying, come work for the Golden Rain Foundation, and then they get here and they're like, oh, it's Rossmore. Also, external advertising, we actually already do that anyway. My department handles that, and we switched over a couple of years and really have been emphasizing Rossmore Walnut Creek. We do have some signs around Rossmore that just have Rossmore with the tree logo. Those would be simple fixes to just add Walnut Creek to that name. Our uniforms also use the Rossmore logo with just the tree. We could switch those over and gradually phase in as we purchase new uniforms with the actual Rossmore Walnut Creek logo. And the social media accounts. We kind of jumped ahead on this. So Javier and I already went around and scooped up all of the Rossmore Walnut Creek social media accounts. Just in case we do decide to go with this brand, we didn't want anyone else to lock those in. The second part of the question that the marketing task force is now looking at is whether or not we want to do this a little more officially by registering a DBA. That's a doing business as. So what would be known as is Golden Rain Foundation doing business as Rossmore Walnut Creek. And we've just started to gather the intel of what this would involve. From an upfront cost standpoint, it's not a lot. It's $55 to register with the county. You do have to run a legal notice in the newspaper. Lucky us, we have that, so that wouldn't cost us anything. And that would be good for 5 years. The question is, how are we then using that DBA? How far do we want to take it? So for example, Dwight has asked the question, could we change the GRF board name to Rossmore Walnut Creek Board? Those are the questions that we're still tackling to try to find the answer to. We don't know. When you're looking at the bylaws, the trust agreement, we do have consulted the lawyer to try to start that conversation to find out just how much we could implement it if we had a DBA. But those are the questions that are now before you as a board. The marketing task force is looking for some feedback as to whether or not they're going in the right direction with the mission statement, the vision statement, and if we should be branding as Rossmore Walnut Creek, and if so, should we also be looking into a DBA?
If I could just make two clarifications. One is that if you go to rossmore.com, you will see a mission and vision statement for the GRF board. This is not to change any of that. These are marketing mission and vision statements for the community. Secondly, the task force cannot and will not be touching the mutuals. The mutuals are their own entity and they do what they want to do. This is only in terms of Rossmore Walnut Creek, because GRF, who is GRF anyway? But.
Okay, any questions for Ann or Dwight? None? Wow. Are there other examples of a DBA so that it further explains that to residents?
So if you look at something like Xfinity, they're also known as Comcast. And sometimes you have a DBA because you may want to sort of emphasize one end of your business over another end of the business. There's interesting ones where some companies started out as different names. So for example, everyone knows what Nike is, but no one knows that Nike started off as Lead Sports Authority. I didn't even know that. And that is its corporate name. It was its corporate name for many, many years, but it had the DBA for Nike before it officially then ended up actually becoming the Nike Corporation. One of the reasons that you do it is, again, because you may have a long, unwieldy name that doesn't really represent what your business is. That's your corporation. That's how you've incorporated. That's how all of your legal documents are done and all of your banking documents are done. But for marketing purposes, for putting yourself out there to the community, you want a name that's more reflective of what your business is.
Okay. Roy.
I think the main purpose for the marketing task force is trying to gain recognition. And instead of Rossmore Walnut Creek, which is a very small town, and I prefer to be considered as Rossmore San Francisco East Bay, because that is national, easily to remember.
Okay, any other questions for Dwight or Ann? Cheryl?
I just have one question. I'm hearing that this is an insignificant cost or, relatively low cost option. That makes me a little bit nervous. I'd like to see some numbers a little bit more fleshed out before we embark on changing our whole brand. That would be my concern with this.
In terms of the DBA, that is part of the work that we're doing right now. Staff is talking with the lawyers to find out, are there any other cost implications in terms of, again, would you need to make changes to things like the bylaws, the trust agreement, that sort of thing? We don't have those answers yet, but we are looking into that. In terms of putting together a marketing plan and a brand strategy and what cost factors are part of that, we really cannot come up with a marketing plan if we don't know what our mission and our vision is. The mission and the vision actually will then point us in the direction. For example, a marketing plan could be external advertising. You could decide that you want a separate marketing website. You could decide that you want brochures. How do you answer this? It depends, again. What's your mission? What's your vision? And more importantly, where's your target audience? If you determine that your primary target audiences are the prospective buyers, then you do have to look at those external marketing tools, ads, the website, etc. We don't have those answers yet, but again, without the mission and the vision statement, without knowing the direction we're going, we can't even start to build that plan.
Okay, so just to clarify, what you're asking us to approve here is the mission and the vision statement, not proceeding with the wholesale change of the name DBA?
Three components. We're asking yes for approval on the mission and the vision statement. And then the second piece is the direction is Rossmore Walnut Creek, and the marketing task force is saying that their recommendation is that we pursue a DBA. So there are three separate things here. They are separated out. And obviously the board can say no to any one of those three, but they are separated out so that you're voting on each one.
Leanne, could I just respond to Roy? Because we didn't answer his question. So the task force said we're Rossmore, but yet if you look at Rossmore, there's one in New Jersey, there's one in Maryland, there's some in Southern California. And so we need to identify who we are beyond just Rossmore. And so then the concept with the task force was Walnut Creek is a premier community in the East Bay, and it's widely known in the Bay Area. So attaching our name to Walnut Creek is the logical thing because that's where we are, and we're in the city of Walnut Creek. So it was very clear that the task force saw that as a great benefit to say Rossmore Walnut Creek.
Okay, Maxine.
I don't know if this is the place for this question or later, but I don't understand what an inclusive lifestyle is. That I understand what a mission statement is, mission statement as well as a vision statement, but I don't understand inclusive lifestyle.
Want to take that one, Dwight, or do you want me to?
Sure. There was a lot of debate in the task force about that word as well as the word diversity, and it was determined that, or consensus by the marketing task force, that attracting diverse residents is a part of our values and our target audience, whereas we wanted to have a word that showed welcoming or inclusive lifestyle was meant to be that welcoming word within the vision statement. And I see you're convinced, Maxine.
Doesn't work for me. Inclusive doesn't fit with lifestyle, but okay.
Any other questions? James.
Okay, so as I listen to the discussion, it sounds like the task force can't move forward unless we agree to all three. Because if I agree to the mission statement and agree to the, what's the other statement? The vision statement, but we can't agree on what to call ourselves, we can't move, right?
No, we could still move. The mission and the vision are the important ones. If you feel those need to be reworked and go back to the task force, then we would go back, take your comments and recommendations and redraft those. The name, the brand identity part, is still somewhat separate from that. We aren't going to push the brand out until the board says this is our brand, and then we start to take those steps. We don't have to take those steps right up front. Before we put together a marketing plan, yes, we will have to know what the name is. But again, you can have a discussion here about these are the pieces for that brand name that we still need clarity on or that we want you to further discuss. It would go back to marketing task force, and then we would come back at the next meeting with trying to incorporate the suggestions that you make.
For example, what the task force has talked about is it's confusing when you first move in here. MOD, who are they? GRF, what's that? This is Rossmore, and people identify with the name Rossmore. So should it be MOD? Perhaps should be Rossmore Property Management. Oh, calling it what it is? Oh, genius. The board could be Rossmore Community Board that says what we are, rather than these odd names that have become a part of Rossmore legacy. So that's how far things could go. Maybe it goes further, but if there's disturbance from the board or from residents, the task force needs to know that soon.
Just to clarify as well, if you decide Rossmore Walnut Creek should be the brand identity, you don't have to buy into all of the pieces. You could decide, we actually want to stop short of calling the board Rossmore Walnut Creek Board. What you're doing is you're just saying that the brand identity name, yes, is Rossmore Walnut Creek. The next step is that marketing then talks about what they would recommend in terms of where you use that name. That would go through planning, then it would go through the board, and the board would still be signing off on those individual pieces of where that name would be used. It's really about starting with what should the name be before you do have the conversation as to where you use it.
I understand all this. is important. And I'm feeling a little bit jammed, I guess, because this is the first I've really seen the vision and the other statements. And I think that this is a really important move for Rossmore. And I guess I just like a little bit more time to really review the statements and understand too what the costs might be going forward.
Let me ask Dwight, the first item under planning is to investigate the possibility of registering it as a DBA. In that investigation, that would talk about the costs and the extent. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, so that could come later. We're not saying we're definitely, that statement is not saying we're definitely doing the DBA.
Right. It's to consider it
Analysis
yes,
of the whole
yeah,
thing.
and asking staff to do that. Yes.
Okay, that helps. Thanks.
Okay.
Dwight, when I was listening to Jeff earlier talking about the 65 years of history here in Rossmore, Rossmore Walnut Creek was a name that was very known and prominent. What is the difference between the branding slogan and the fact that that name, Rossmore Walnut Creek, which is currently used, what is the distinction between the two?
I think what has happened is in today's technological world, Rossmore Walnut Creek got dropped when it came to online recognition. Rossmore.com says nothing about Walnut Creek. Social media accounts, we didn't have those. They didn't exist 65 years ago, but so it's important that we're clear now and clear with everything resident-facing as well as outward-facing of who we are. One of the things the marketing task force says is it's just as important to market to our residents as it is to the outside, who we are, what we offer, all those things.
I hate to say this up front, but there's one other thing to keep in mind with a DBA. If you purchase Rossmore Walnut Creek, no one else in Contra Costa can have that name. And like I said, I hate saying this out loud because please don't anyone go buy it. But the point is, if you want to own it, you have to pay for it. And it could be as simple as the board eventually deciding we want to just purchase the name so no one else can have it, but we don't actually want to implement it, like I said, as the board name or as part of our governing documents. It would just be about owning it and not letting anyone else do it.
Yes, Ted.
So I lived in Southern California for 27 years before moving up here. And when I go out and tell people I'm from Southgate, California, nobody had a clue what that was. So I used to just say I'm in the LA area. And is where I was from. But if I say Walnut Creek, California, everybody already knows Walnut Creek, California. It's got an identifying name to itself. When you go online and you put in Rossmore, like Dwight said, it's all across the nation. Rossmore's used everywhere. I stopped in a community called Rossmore when I was in Southern California just recently, and we also have a Rossmore community down there included within that Rossmore area, like Saranap over here. There's a whole area down there called Rossmore. So I think that I would like to make a motion on the name to this piece of it could be done so that we have something to work with going forward here, and it'll also lock it in for us so that we can have it. And so I'm going to make, just to test out the board here, I'm going to make a motion that on the recommendation of the marketing task force to adopt the brand name Rossmore Walnut Creek and to do business set it up as a DBA for Rossmore.
Okay. Yes.
Second.
Okay,
No.
We have a second from Carol.
Yeah, there'd be good discussion.
Any further discussion?
I have a comment.
Go James.
Okay. I don't know if I want to make a motion to say we adopt Rossmore Walnut Creek as doing business as, because we don't know what Ann may discover in terms of, the point that Cheryl made, right? There may be all kinds of stuff that we don't know about. Could we just kind of maybe pay $55 to reserve the name?
So you would be paying $55 to register. That locks it in for 5 years.
Right,
What you do with it beyond that,
Right.
up to you.
I would rather spend $55 just to lock it in for 5 years than do all the research, blah, 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 blah. And after all that research, we may choose to adopt it. Then at that time, we'll make a motion to adopt it. But this time, I don't want to make a motion to adopt it because we're not sure we're going to adopt it. That makes sense?
Okay, so, well, does somebody want to speak to that first?
I would agree with that. I think spending the $55 to get the DBA registered, that makes a lot of sense to me. Understanding all the repercussions of moving forward with rebranding everything, I think that is a much larger discussion, and I think we need to explore that a little bit more.
So you're actually talking about separating it out?
Yep.
Okay. Roy, I think.
I
Roy-
also think the idea of having the name, we own it, but there should be no requirement that we are required to use it. It's simply we own something that we can use going forward, but I would want to make clear that there is no need to say that, okay, we are now Rossmore Walnut Creek until we individually decide that.
And Roy?
I want to repeat again, I'm sorry. I think if we want to do in business change a name, Rossmore San Francisco Bay is far better than Walnut Creek because San Francisco is well known worldwide and it's also the technically innovative. And San Francisco real estate is known to be the highest one. We should be settled for better, not for less.
I could just point out one thing. Oakland Airport right now, which tried to change its name to San Francisco Oakland International Airport, is mired in a court case. San Francisco does not want its name attached to an Oakland entity. So we can do this, but there will be a lengthy investigation. We would have to really dive in as to whether or not we could even do that since we're not San Francisco.
Okay, James?
Just to comment on Roy's comment, I think if we brand ourselves as Rossmore San Francisco, that's very misleading to potential buyers because they're thinking that, oh, I'm going to live in San Francisco. But they are not going to live in San Francisco. They're going to live in Walnut Creek. And so anyway, that's my thought on that.
I have one question. I mean Rossmore San Francisco Bay, B-A-Y.
So, Leanne, there's a motion on the table.
Okay, we do. We have a motion on the table, and I'm hearing that some of the board want to revise that motion. Ted, how are you
I think
feeling?
we have to do a vote first and then I'll revise it, don't we? Or
Correct. Yes. So the process is that amending this motion would change the structure. So that would not be a proper motion. So you need to dispose of this one and then move on to the next motion.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. We have a second from Carol. And Deborah, could you do a roll call of that motion?
Can you reread exactly what we're voting on, please? Thanks.
Yes, I have a slight summary. I wrote it very quickly. It's to go with the recommendation of the task force to change the Rossmore brand name to Rossmore Walnut Creek and to do business, and to set it up as a DBA.
There's two parts to this motion. You would be saying, yes, Rossmore Walnut Creek is the name we want to rebrand as, and we want to register as a DBA. The second suggestion, if this is voted down, would be to just register the DBA for Rossmore Walnut Creek and then have the conversation later about whether you want to change the name.
Thanks.
Okay, so we're going to do a roll call on that motion. Deborah?
Absolutely. Hamaji?
Yes.
Hines?
No.
Topper?
No.
Hurd?
No.
Bentley?
yes.
Lee?
No.
Blair?
Yes.
Walker?
Yes.
Yay.
No.
So the noes have it. The motion fails.
So I'll make a motion.
Okay, so motion fails. James?
So can I make a new motion that we
can.
just register Rossmore Warner Creek as what Ann explained? You're doing business as, to pay the $55 fee to lock in the name for 5 years? That's my motion.
I'll second.
Okay.
I will
Mary
need you to
seconded.
repeat your motion, James.
Okay, my motion is to spend the $55 to lock in the name Rossmore Warner Creek, doing business as Rossmore Warner Creek, to pay the $55 fee to lock in that name for 5 years.
Okay, Mary seconded. Discussion. Dwight?
So, I don't know if you would mind changing that just a bit. What the marketing task force was wanting the board to do was to consider adopting the name Rossmore Walnut Creek and pursue the DBA. So perhaps the motion could say the board will consider adopting Rossmore Walnut Creek, because otherwise staff doesn't know where to go and the task force doesn't know where to go. You want to, what do you want to do? You just want to sit still?
I think that's a reasonable adjustment.
I would insert the words explore the possibility so that we've got a little broader definition there for staff.
I agree with that. Consider possibilities is consider almost sounds like it's a have to, whereas explore puts it backwards a little bit and gives us more time.
Recommending is that we register the DBA, spend the $55 to register the DBA for Rossmore Walnut Creek, and then explore the possibility of using that as the brand name.
James, does that wording work for you?
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
That's fine.
Mary, the second
Yes.
works for you? Okay. Deb, any further discussion? Deborah, could you do a roll call on that motion?
Of course. Modgy,
Yes?
Hines,
Yes.
Hopper,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Benton,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes?
Bear,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
Yang.
No.
Okay, the motion carries.
Okay, thank you very much. The second topic under that is the mission statement. And Dwight, did you want to discuss that at all?
I'll be happy to answer any questions inclusively.
Does anybody have any questions about it? Do we have a motion?
There were two motions. I think they were separate.
Yeah, they're separate. The mission is separate.
Okay, we're taking time to review both the mission and the vision. Just so everybody knows,
Sorry.
mission comes first.
Wasn't there a discussion that Cheryl brought up about kind of putting this on hold and just move ahead with the name at this point?
I guess, yeah, that was my recommendation, just to give us a little bit more time. I want to understand two things. One, how would that impact the marketing task force? But also, where is this going? I mean,
And why don't you take the second part of that first?
You bet. So where this is going, once you adopt the mission and the vision statements, again, that becomes the foundation of the work that we're trying to do. The statement of values are built off of what your mission is. Your target audience is built off of where we want to direct this mission and vision, so that when we start to talk about the components of what a marketing plan might look like, to bring back an actual marketing plan to planning and then the full board, it is based on your mission and your vision statements. We actually cannot start to really talk about what a marketing plan would look like. And by that I mean, how do we want to communicate what Rossmore is? Do you want to make changes to your website? Do you want to make changes to how you advertise? Do you want a social media component? You can't answer any of those questions and start to develop a plan until you know what your mission and your vision statements are. Because the mission and the vision, that's what you're actually marketing.
So in terms
I just want to make a comment that I like the mission statement. I like the vision as well. I think it's very inclusive of the attributes of Rossmore. And I think it paints a picture of Rossmore that is inviting. And if you're doing marketing, that's the goal. You make it look like, hey, this is where you want to be. This is where you want to spend your retirement years. Ted.
So the marketing task force has been working on this for a couple of months and came up with this. We need to have this for direction of, excuse me, of our marketing task force, which has already been extended. The time on it has already been extended 1 month. By passing this is not something that is written in stone for all time. It's something, it could be adjusted a year from now as we see. It could be adjusted possibly by the end of the task force if we found it necessary to do it. So it's not something that is going to be, it is the direction that we want to go now. Without this, I think that we could hinder what the task force has to do and the direction that we're going to go and figure out what is going to be happening for the best marketing for Rossmore down the line. And it could extend until this is ratified, it could extend that whole process where this task force could be going on for quite a long time to get the information. I don't think that the mission statement I think it says a lot about what Rossmore is about. I think the vision statement states clearly that we want to look to the future to keep Rossmore a society a community that is going to be growing with the needs of the people in the community. So if there is something there that is just jumping out at people, any of you guys that is saying that, no, I just can't live with this thing, I don't see why we can't move forward with this. So, I mean, that's...
Leanne?
Okay, Roy and then Mary.
I have been in California since 1971. Before I moved in here, I had a problem to distinguish Lafayette and Walnut Creek. And I studied in Bay Area. And so if we want the marketing and we want the identity, nationwide, San Francisco Bay is better, wider. And recently, I was reviewed some data. I realized San Francisco Bay has a North Bay, Center Bay, and the South Bay. We are in the North Bay, okay? So I think San Francisco Bay can be recognized by anybody in Boston or in anywhere else. Walnut Creek.
Leanne, could I make a suggestion?
I have a
That we
big
take a
problem
straw
with
vote on Roy's proposal?
By Mary, though.
The important word that I see in both item 2 and 3 is consider. We are not being asked to adopt or approve. We're simply considering, which to me continues the conversation. So I find myself in favor because it's not a have to, it's a possibility.
Yeah, I think all these clarifications have been extremely helpful.
So
I have
you're
a question.
suggesting the word adopt be changed to consider on both items?
No, leave them both consider. There's no adopt.
Consider. Yes, okay. Got it.
We can vote on it and it's not.
Wait, so is that right?
All right. Any other discussion on those two before we look for a motion? Roy, go ahead.
I think the GRF should not take a position because I heard many people reflect to me about GRF's very unpopular decisions. And this is misleading. We can hold the vote. We can do some other things.
Okay.
I even have a problem with the
Roy,
name.
that's not pertinent to this discussion right now. Okay. We heard your opinion. Thank you.
Just to clarify, the request or the recommendation from the task force is to consider their recommendation to adopt. So it's not continuing consideration of, it's the board consider what they're recommending, which is to adopt the mission and vision for the marketing.
Thank you, Jeff.
So can wording be changed later? I really can't vote on it.
So if I could just reiterate what Ted said.
Just explain that, yeah.
These are not being etched in stone. And so everything that we do can always be subject to change. We are looking for feedback, but if we don't have a clear direction of where we're going, we can't move forward. And
Right,
so
this gives the task force a basis for moving forward.
Yes.
What's our goal? Where are we going? I think it's very important that we nail this down. Ted?
I would like to make a motion to consider the recommendation from the Marketing Task Force to adopt the proposed Rossmore Walnut Creek mission statement.
Okay, does anybody have a second?
It wouldn't be consider, it would be to approve their recommendation.
I'll go with that change.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Dwight will second. Any further discussion? All right, Deborah, could you do a
Hi.
roll call, please?
I'm confused about the motion. So I know there's an adopt and a propose and a consider. Jeff, can you clarify what you had recommended that they were? So I have a motion on the table as recommendation to from the Marketing Task Force to adopt the proposed Rossmore Walnut Creek mission statement. What was the edit?
So it would be that the board approves the recommendation from the task force to adopt the mission and vision statement as presented. Just the mission, one at a time.
Got it. And you wanted roll
you
call,
okay with
Leanne?
Okay,
I'm okay
yes.
with that.
Let's do the roll call on that, please. Ted has agreed that that is the wording.
Okay. Amaji?
Yes.
Hines?
Yes.
Tupper?
Yes.
Hurt?
Yes.
Bentley?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Blair?
Yes.
Walker?
Yes.
Yang?
No.
And the motion carried.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to the third item here, which is in regards to the vision statement. We could phrase it the same way, since that seems.
I'll move that.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, Dwight moves.
I need a full restatement of the motion, please, because when you say it's same as last time, I need a full restatement for record.
I recommend, I'll do the motion.
Dwight's making the motion.
No.
No, Ted.
No, actually, I made it, and Jeff was going to word it for me.
Okay.
So the board accepts the recommendation from the marketing task force to adopt the vision statement as presented.
So moved.
Okay. Is there a second? Ted makes the second. Any further discussion? Deborah, can you do a roll call, please?
Assuming the words can be adjusted. Assuming the words can be adjusted. So I just want to make clear that if I vote yes, the words can still be adjusted with further input.
Stone tablets are not used here.
Okay.
Just to clarify, that was a yes.
That is a yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Deborah, could you do the roll call, please?
Absolutely. Kamaji?
Yes?
Hines?
Yes.
Hopper?
Yes.
Hurt?
Yes.
Bentley?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Blair?
Yes.
Walker?
Yes.
Yang?
No.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. Thank you, board. We're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll resume at 10:45. We're going to have a slight change here. We're going to get a presentation from Ken Johnson, our Gallagher representative. But first, I'd like Dwight to make a comment if he could.
And I'm negligent in not recognizing members of the marketing task force. We have some really, really talented residents who are contributing a lot of great ideas and expertise to our marketing task force, and I want to thank all of them for doing that.
Thank you. I second that. Okay, I'd like to introduce Ken Johnson from Gallagher. Thank you, Ken, for being here.
Before Ken starts speaking, just to give a little introduction to this topic, our insurance program renews on January 1, and so we've asked Ken to come and give an overview of that placement, and that includes all of our various lines of insurance. It is not often that we come and get to talk and give a good report about insurance, so hopefully this will be some good news in relation to the overall state of insurance and our placement for the current year. We have been meeting with the insurance task force, which is made up of members from the various mutuals and some mutual presidents. And we also did this presentation in a little bit more detail than what we're going to give today to the mutual presidents. So we're kind of doing a road show, but Ken, you want to?
Thanks, Jeff.
Highlights.
Yeah, my name is Ken Johnson, and I'm with Gallagher. And on behalf of Gallagher, I would like to say thank you for the opportunity to speak to the board today. It's always a privilege for Gallagher to speak to Golden Rain Foundation, so thank you very much. As Jeff said, we'll go through this presentation quickly because you do have a very full agenda. Let's see here. So you're seeing it on your monitors, I see now. So for the renewal this year, that's just a little bit about Gallagher. Those are all sister companies of ours. So on the property insurance this year, we came in with a year-over-year decrease of 11.2%, a little bit below 22% versus budget. The liability insurance was an increase of 5.7%, and I'll touch on that. The umbrella was an increase of 25.4%. The D&O was 5%, and everything else was a reduction of approximately 15%. So overall, a little over 10% reduction in insurance costs this year. That liability lines, that is a concern. We've already started working with Jeff. We brought that up in September of 2024. The liability marketplace is changing in that private equity funding has found its way into the world of litigation. Private equity is giving money to lawyers of all sizes through their bar associations to get litigation to jury trials. So it's a big concern. We're working on, we've already started our captive feasibility study, so Gallagher is very much involved in looking for alternatives for that line of business. That's just a little bit about the marketplace. I think it would probably, everybody would want to know, hey, where do we stack up after the Los Angeles fires? And that's a snapshot of your insurance portfolio. We can go back and talk about any of these issues, as it is it's a fairly complex program. That's the property insurance by itself. But with regards to the Los Angeles fires, I think there's something really important for you guys to understand and be able to share with the community. Rossmore has done some very creative things, thanks to Jeff Matheson, thanks to the insurance task force, and thanks to the board for the approval. Number one, if somebody says, oh boy, what's going to happen to my rates because of the Los Angeles and San Diego wildfires that destroyed those communities, don't forget, Rossmore has implemented an alternative risk transfer program that is the primary $5 million. In that program, you locked your rate in for 5 years. So you have 3 more years of a locked in rate for the most volatile portion of any quota share layered program, the primary $5 million. So that was a really smart decision on your part. Don't forget, that primary $5 million is participating, so 85% of that premium comes back to you, back to Golden Rain Foundation, and you have approximately, based upon losses, and you have approximately, conservatively, $6 million in your account earning interest now. The other part of it is the diversity of insurance companies. You saw me quickly go through this slide right here. When I took over this account, you had a couple of insurance companies that were on there with big tranches. Intact had $50 million. Great American had $45 million worth of insurance in this program. Now, the way it's structured, let's say, for example, after the fires, AWAC or Golden Bear loses their reinsurance. That's easy to replace one of those tranches as opposed to a 50, or if, like, say both of those walked away from the program, you have a $100 million gap. So the way you've diversified your program is, for the wildfire group, it's a brilliant move. You guys, we do AIR RMS. It's state-of-the-art modeling. Underwriters get very comfortable with Gallagher's modeling for Rossmore and what Jeff approves. You, up in the upper right-hand corner, you implemented appraisals, right? So we're going into our third year of. We've got 2 years under our belt, and we're going into the third year to really fine-tune the valuation. Underwriters love to see that. They're looking at that and they go, these people are hitting it on every day. You know, I'm confident with the values that I'm insuring, so that they're not underreporting their values. You are a FireWise USA candidate. You are on your way to becoming a certified member. And that, with the fact that we fly underwriters out here and Jeff meets underwriters at RIMS, those are vital things that you have done. Just the next step is to say, hey, you know, what we got to continue the risk mitigation on the wildfire. Gallagher's been tasked to do that. You know, one thing that's kind of interesting, and I'll just touch on it quickly. In the state of California, they rate, the Workers' Compensation Insurance Rating Bureau rates entities by, they rate every account in the state, and they give them what's known as an experience modification factor. That shows how safe the entity is, you know, whether it's plumbing contractors or anything, right? And there are other organizations like Golden Rain, other Golden Rains in Southern California, and they have experience mods as well as you have an experience mod. Their experience mods down there, high is bad, low is good. Theirs are a 165 and a 186. Golden Rain Foundation's experience modification factor is a 68. You guys are not even in the same class as those guys. You are the best of the best. So your safety out here, you know, I pull into the community today, I see somebody out there working. He's got all his PPE on. He was spraying. He's got his mask on, goggles, suit. This is a very, very well-run organization, and it is Gallagher's privilege to represent you into the marketplace. And that's, you know, I know you're busy. You've got a lot going on. So with this board meeting, so I think that's the gist of it. Everything else is just, you know, more of what I spoke about. Jeff, is there anything that I missed?
No, I think the main thing is that our placement this year is below 2024, but also a savings to budget. This is especially critical for the mutuals who budgeted, based on our original estimates, 18 to 20% increase from 2024. So they will individually be seeing a significant savings to budget. We'll be working with those mutuals on how that is accounted for over the next several months. Also, as Ken mentioned, we are continuing our work with the alternative risk placement, and we should be seeing a significant return. A lot of the work that we continue to do with the mutuals and the community and that the board has supported goes to improving not just our safety against wildfire, but for those one-off type house fires that really impact that initial layer. And that's where we're trying to actually save. If we can eliminate those losses, this community will see a significant return on that investment. So overall, just good news. We are still, however, at about 40% coverage. So this does not improve our standing in terms of people being able to get traditional mortgages. But we're continuing to work on that on different fronts.
Okay, any questions for Ken? Dwight?
And Ken, thank you for Gallagher's great work on this, and we love saving money. But as Jeff just mentioned, not being 100% coverage does affect the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac mortgage world. The spike in rates we've seen over the last 5 years is astronomical. You have noted in previous years, maybe prior to the 5 years, that rates go up and down in the insurance industry. Can we expect that downward trend to continue and perhaps get us back to 100% coverage in a decade or so?
Yeah, there's two parts to that question, Dwight. It's a great question. So when we came through our renewals on January 1 this year, we looked at that, and despite having tremendous losses last year, very costly losses across the industry from a couple of hurricanes that hit Florida, as well as some wildfires that hit Southern California, the marketplace, the reinsurance marketplace, was coming through with reductions. And so that, to me, led me to believe, hey, these guys now are comfortable with the valuations that they're seeing from large property placements around the globe. And they're also comfortable with the rate that they're able to get for the exposures, right? So we're starting to see a stabilization in the marketplace. And with that stabilization, you bring competition fosters. And so we saw a 10% bump, right? And so now we've got, and so I believe that was the case, unless, for example, there was a $100 billion hit to the reinsurance world, right? And that's what we saw with Los Angeles. So that's a bit of a wild card for the industry as a whole, to answer your question, and one part of your question, and so there was stabilization there. I believe that the market will remain consistent on that. Jeff and I spend a lot of time together, so we'll look very closely at what transpires with the April 1 renewals, the 4/1 renewals. I have a big July 1 renewal basis, so that's always an indication of what's going on. So he knows what's going on in the marketplace, and so I don't have a crystal ball, but I would think, you have done everything to make Rossmore a very attractive risk. And as far as getting to the full limit, $2.8 billion worth of wood frame, older wood frame construction, not fully, wildfire or fire sprinkler protected in a wildfire zone, is always going to be a challenge. The cost of just buying that amount of insurance, even if it was at the same limit, at the same rate as we have here, is going to be difficult, right? And the big challenge, the last thing I'll say is, let's say we went out to Berkshire Hathaway and said, hey, we need $500 million worth of capacity over our $1.3 billion that we have in place, right? Well, the challenge there is, you would think, well, that rate's going to be it should be really discounted because nobody's going to get to it, right? But at the same time, Berkshire has the ability to deploy that capacity somewhere else where they would get a better rate from it, right? So why tie it up here at a 12-cent rate when I can move it down here and get an 18-cent rate? That's the challenge. I don't want to get too much in the weeds of the insurance world, but that's something for you guys to know.
Thank you, I think.
Any other questions
the
for
quick
Ken?
answer to that was, we probably won't see full coverage in the future.
Ted?
So as time goes on with the fire mitigation, we've done the 450 acres around Rossmore, and the Firewise Committee looking to help the mutuals harden up all their buildings, and we're not there yet, but is something like that going to be considered in the future? as they look at Rossmore with all of the things that we're doing to harden up all our structures and protecting us against major wildfires?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question, Ted. As you and I had discussed earlier, I think it would be, I'll run it by Jeff, but as we had created the drone video a couple of years ago, which we share with underwriters that can't come here physically, but are interested in the account and want to learn more about it, if we were able to have a video with the Q&A back and forth with yourself and the Firewise task force, as well as a video that shows maybe a collage of the work that's been done in the community, that's great stuff. Because what we're trying to do is we want to separate ourselves from all the other municipalities, all the other big property owners around the United States, because they're always looking at this stuff. Remember, we just think wildfire here, but in Florida, it's wind. In the Midwest, it's hail and convex storm. Tornadoes were a devastating amount of losses last year, right? So if underwriters go, well, look at this thing. This is a great account. Look at the work they've done. That's really what we want to accomplish. So yeah, that would go a long ways.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Ken? Well, thank you very much for being here and working with our situation. We're going to resume the agenda on item 9B, the Policy Committee. And I will give a little overview. Last meeting, we talked about revising the resident forum procedures a slight bit. We're going to continue that discussion in February. And then also, now that online elections are legal, we're working out how that will occur in Rossmore. And again, that's an ongoing conversation. We'll be talking about that in February. And then I'd like to move to item 9B1. And Ann Peterson, if you could address that for us.
Sure. So this came up, it's the policy regarding the TV station and whether or not religion and political programming was allowed on the Rossmore TV programs. We were allowing some programs like the Big Questions Forum put on by the Interfaith Council, and we had a resident call to challenge us for violating the policy. When we took a closer look at the policy and the program, it was by the letter of the law, yes, it did contain religious programming. So some residents who were involved, not just with the Interfaith Council, but other groups here in Rossmore, asked us to bring it to the policy committee to ask if they would consider taking that part out and allowing religious and political programming onto Rossmore TV programs. So the committee talked at several meetings and decided that allowing the programming would, changing the policy to allow the programming would present too many challenges in terms of what is actually allowed and what is not allowed. One of the examples that Leanne used was, what if the Church of Satan wanted to be part of that conversation? Would we have any grounds in which to exclude them from the programming? And we would not. And so it was determined by the policy committee to leave that part of the policy intact, but to make one minor change. The policy currently is talking about politics in terms of just whether or not it's bipartisan. They wanted to remove the word bipartisan so that it encompasses all political programming. It is important to note that we are a community access station, so we are not permitted to do anything with regards to candidates or election matters. The minute that we put one thing onto Rossmore TV, we would have to open it up to everything. And we simply do not have the staff or resources to be able to handle that level of advocacy for candidates or election measures. And so that's what's before you now, is just to make a minor change to the policy by taking out the word bipartisan and making it all politics.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ann? Dwight?
So, Ann, you said something there that clicked with me, because you talked about candidates and campaigns and those sorts of things versus politics. I'm not sure how politics is defined. So, for example, we have two new senators. We have a new U.S. senator and we have a new California senator representing Rossmore. If we had a town hall that was televised, is that verboten to be on Rossmore TV?
It really does depend. So if they're not if they're not discussing any election matters, if they are not talking about
anything they talk about election matters?
No, if they talk about elections, again, fair access comes into play. And then we would have to allow any opposing side to come in and use the TV station for the exact same thing. So I know it seems confusing, but as a community access station, we don't pay any broadcast fees at all. And broadcast fees can be upwards of $500,000 to be on the actual TV. And so because we don't, we are not allowed to do things like commercials. And we are not allowed to put any political advocacy programs on. So again, we have to be very careful when town halls come in here. We do not film them because we have no way of knowing if the politician is going to say, don't forget to re-elect me. The minute they do that, anybody who is running, and we're talking anyone, you know that sometimes there are a lot of candidates running for certain positions. We now have to open up the TV station and give them the exact same amount of time. So if the town hall was 2 hours, each candidate gets 2 hours. And so that is why we're very careful with politics, and we have not been putting that onto Rossmore TV.
But Ann, I remember an insurance town hall where we had a state senator on the dais and spoke. So I guess my point is when we say politics, that's a big word covering lots of things. And should it be more specific about what we have to maintain in order to be that access television station?
So first off, anytime there is a politician that comes on TV, we do pull them aside and explain the rule so they know they're not allowed to talk about elections. That, again, was a conversation that the policy committee had, and they made the decision, the group made the decision, that it was too difficult to start deciding what's allowed and what's not allowed. Where is the line drawn? It's one reason why they decided to take out the word bipartisan and to say no politics. I will not pretend. We have conversations over on the Rossmore TV side all the time. If somebody comes in and they do a program and we have to review it and then say, is this now in violation of the policy? One thing that we have been allowing, and maybe the board after today tells me, nope, that's not allowed either, historical references for politics we've allowed. You want to talk about Abraham Lincoln? We haven't excluded that. But if you wanted to talk about, for example, Donald Trump while Joe Biden was the president, it was still too modern, and there was conversation about him running again, and so we were, yes, excluding that. It's not easy sometimes to make these decisions, but you look at it and we're talking about politics in the context of, does it apply to modern day politics? Is it a conversation that is in the news right now? Those are what are being excluded right now from the political conversations in the programming. Again, you want to talk about historical, as in much later back. Yes, we have been allowing that.
Just a little more clarification. So I remember a show where the president of the Central SAN was on Rossmore TV and interviewed by Tim O'Keefe. He's a political candidate when he runs for election. So I guess I'm looking for more clarification of what politics
So again, we were in violation of the policy. We're going to admit that right up front. When we were looking at this, we were taking a more hard line stance. For example, with religion, we were thinking, well, as long as it's not a religious service, you're not just talking about one denomination of a religion. When it was talking about politics, we were really trying to exclude out things that were talking about actual political measures, actual political candidates. It wasn't until we got challenged by a resident who said, you're not following policy, that we went to the policy committee to ask for clarification. We got that clarification. We were told no. So in the future, Central SANS, if it's an elected official, would not be coming on Rossmore TV.
I don't want to belabor the point, but we had a city council member here this morning on Rossmore TV. Is she not invited anymore? Are you gonna do a blackout when the city council member is at the?
No. So again, if that's a conversation you're having on the side, if she were to come up here in front of the GRF board and say, "Don't forget, I'm running for election," yes, that has to come out. Under our policy, it's not allowed. But again, they know coming in. There's all conversations are always happening about. Again, what are you talking about? That does not happen here. So we're assured going into this program that we don't have to worry about that. But if we think that there is a possibility, if you have an elected official who's attending a much larger town hall, for example, a much larger forum, yes, we do have to have conversations with them. Please don't bring any election matters and current legislation into the conversation. Current legislation that's up for vote that could have an impact with the public vote.
Our city council members are very careful, and it's very different than having an interview about an election. Any other questions for Ann? Maxine?
First of all, I can't even begin to understand all of the ramifications of this and how this all works. But my question really is, and I can only imagine how difficult it is for you to make these decisions, but there are many residents in Rossmore who might be housebound and do like to access some of this information. And so I have a little bit of difficulty with understanding how we block everything. And if we do, how can we make some of that information more available to residents? Did that make sense, what I just said?
Just to be clear, we're only talking about the programming that Rossmore TV is filming. So clubs can still continue to have their own virtual programs and put that out to their members. They can still do and videotape their own meetings and give that to their members. We're not talking about restricting anything that the clubs do. We're only talking about what it is that we film, what it is we put on Rossmore TV in terms of channel 1083, and what we're putting online on rossmoretv.com.
And how are those organizations helped to make that Zooming possible or to make that available? Is there anything we can do to help?
They are not. We do not do anything with that. If they are working with AV Tech, if they have paid the fee to have AV Tech, then they probably are getting some assistance with setting up a Zoom, for example. But the Rossmore TV station, we strictly only do the programming that we're putting on the TV, with the exception of one thing. All of the GRF board committee meetings, we do get the Zoom recordings and we put those on YouTube.
If I could just add to that, Maxine, there are clubs that tape their meetings and put that video as a YouTube video onto their website. So there are different ways of doing this. So there are people in Rossmore willing to do that kind of filming. You could do it yourself with a cell phone. We're not saying that it can't be broadcast somewhere. We're just saying that they have to find that medium themselves.
I think that we need to communicate that very clearly so it doesn't look like we're stopping all of that conversation.
We did discuss that in the meeting quite a bit, but we do have to message that out. Any other questions for Ann? All right, we have a decision to make on this because there's a slight change to the policy, just taking out the word bipartisan. Do we have a motion?
This is a first reading, and so it will be reestablished at the next meeting.
You're right. I forgot. I meant to introduce that this was a first reading, and for residents, that means that we debate the issue, and then we have a second reading in February or the following month, and so that is where we'll make the vote. Okay. Thank you. Dwight.
I'm going to beat a dead horse. I would like to see the policy committee refine or enhance that politics definition, because what I hear Ann saying, it's all related to elections and campaigns that we have to be careful about. But saying that we can't have any politician on Rossmore TV ever, as a policy is not a healthy thing for our community. And we were in violation of it this morning. And by the way, city council members clamor to be the liaison representative to Rossmore because it's free TV time to 10,000 residents. Let's not put our heads in the sand on that. So I would like to see that considered.
Okay, but doesn't that play into what you just said about once you do that, you have to open that up to every candidate in the community?
Not exactly. I mean, if you're talking, like Dwight said, if you're talking about having a city council person talk in front of a meeting and they're not delving into anything that the voters are voting on, if they're not delving into their reelection campaign, then you aren't infringing on that area. You don't have issues. It's a straight up news report. There's no advocacy involved. But if you do have a politician who wants to come on and, for example, advocate for water conservation and the measures that should go before the state legislature, then yes, that's not going to be permitted. I mean, there's a lot that's involved in what we do with both the TV station and the news side, where we are asked to make judgment calls, and we talk about it as a group. So with the TV programming, George, Brendan, and I, George is the station manager, Brendan is our studio coordinator. We have these conversations. We just had this recently where a woman came on and talked about her book and referenced a small reference to politics, where we asked ourselves, is this okay? Yes. It's a small reference to more of a historical happening than what is currently happening. But it is, I will admit, it is a judgment call. Oftentimes it is a judgment call. And if we can't make it, there are things in the policy that allow us to then bring it to the general manager and to bring it to the GRF president to make a final ruling. And sometimes the general manager and the GRF president will say, no, we think that's fine within the confines of this policy. So again, we can take it back. We could have the policy committee further talk about what the definition of politics is. I'm going to bring this up. It also then brings to question exactly what the policy committee has already talked about and what's the definition of religion. Because there are some clubs that have argued that their programming is more spiritual in nature than about a denomination for religion. The policy committee also had a lengthy discussion about that and said it isn't about denomination, it's about religion. It's about whether or not a religious group could come and talk about their perspective, even if it's just about spirituality.
James.
Okay, as I'm listening to this thing, I see your point. There's a fine line there. You know, so the policy committee will meet again in February. Is it possible for you to come up with some wording that could kind of split that fine line?
I need to have a better understanding from the board or from the policy committee about what it is where you would want the exception for this to be. Okay. Because again, when we had the last conversation as a full policy committee meeting, the conversation was no religion, no politics. It was a very hard line. There really wasn't sort of that middle ground. In terms of politics, we were specifically talking about, yes, campaigns and election, but that did get expanded out where there was a conversation as to, the specific conversation that was brought up is, could you talk about January 6th? And everyone said no. That's a political hot button right now. So again, that's where judgment call comes into play. If you try to be very specific in saying this is the kind of politics that's not allowed, then what happens when we get to right where that gray area is? We talked about this. The policy committee said that they did not want staff put in a position of having to make those decisions. That's why you guys decided to make it religion and politics. Happy to have the conversation again. Just wanted to remind us that we did have that conversation in the last 2 meetings.
Deborah, could you give us some instruction when we're doing a first reading? what's the method for taking something back to the committee?
It's a simple comment from the board direction, just stating that you're referring this item back to the committee for further review and provide the specific guidelines on what the committee needs to do. And you can bring it back the next month as a first reading with an understanding of those revisions.
And would that be a straw vote to make that decision?
It could be.
Okay, I'm going to do that. I'd like to see a show of hands of what board members would like this policy to go back to the policy committee. Those who want it to go back, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. It's just
Potential change.
Okay, we had 3 people wanting the policy to go back to the committee. Those who feel that the policy should go forward to a second reading. 1, 2, 3. Okay. We will go forward with this policy as it is to the February meeting for a second reading. Okay. Now we're going to move on to item 9B2. And Anne, if you could give us an overview of that as well.
So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to do a presentation because I think it's important to understand we've been talking about this topic since last year, the middle of last year. So I want to provide a little background and explain how we reached the point where what we are asking, again, this is a first reading. We won't do any voting until a second reading at the next meeting. But what we're asking is that we remove the exception in Policy 601.2 that allows political columns, political opinion, to run in the newspaper. And so, again, I'd like to do a short presentation that gives you a little bit of a background. Gerald is not. Okay. So first off, political columns have been running in the Rossmore News for 25 years. This is the 3rd time in the past 6 years that we are bringing this conversation about whether the columns should continue in the paper to the board, because we are faced with an unsustainable amount of work for getting those columns and the subsequent letters into the paper. A lot of people have talked about what is the Rossmore News. Some people have classified us as a newsletter. Just to clarify, we are actually an official and legal newspaper. That means that we can sell display advertising and we can sell legal notices for the county and the courthouse. The money raised from that is part of the revenue that we use to offset our operating cost and holding down that coupon. We're also classified as a community newspaper. That's because we serve a particular community, the one that is inside the gates. A conversation about the First Amendment rights, if banning the columns would be an infringement of First Amendment. Just a reminder, the Golden Ring Foundation is a private entity, and the Supreme Court has actually said private publishers are the ones who have a First Amendment right to control the content of their publication. And we do that already through policy GRF, through the GRF policy 601.2. So we have established that our priority is Rossmore News coverage. As a result, we do not have news about international, national, or state events. When it comes to city and county, we only run those as space permits when we feel it has a direct impact on the residents who live here. It also sets the limits for letters in the residence form. Those letters have to be germane to the activities and affairs of Rossmore. The reason that sometimes you've seen politics in letters is because they can respond to the columns that are written in the paper. So if there are no political columns, there would be no political letters. It also stipulates which columns can have politics included. Right now, those are 4 columns. 3 of them are coordinated and written by the clubs, the Republican Club, the Democrats Club, and Sustainable Rossmore. The other one is Alternative Voices. This is the only one that is open to the community at large, and it runs every 4 weeks. One of the biggest misperceptions I hear all the time is, why are we fact-checking letters and columns their opinion? The reality is there are a lot of facts included in columns. Opinion is a statement that expresses a feeling, an attitude, or a belief. A fact is something that can be verified. It's either true or it's false. So I'm going to use an example from an actual Rossmore News column. Here's the part that's the opinion. A good example of Trump's admiration for dictators is his July 2018 summit meeting with Putin in Helsinki, Finland. That is the writer's opinion. He then provides a fact to back that up, that during a news conference, Trump actually replied that he accepted Putin's denials about interfering in the election over the findings of the CIA and the FBI. We can verify that fact just by looking at the news coverage from that news conference. So that's the difference between the two. Here's an example of what we require when we ask for fact-checking sources for all of the columns that are submitted. Anything that's a direct quote, whether it's something that somebody said or something you're directly quoting out of another article, we fact check that. If something's in direct quotes, it has to be what was actually said. You can't decide to change the words just because you think you can make it sound better. It's also dates, historical references, statistics, other numerical facts, details about policies and legislations, alleged crimes, court cases, anecdotes about real-life events, contact information, and anything that's attributed to another source. So any information taken from another newspaper, from a TV station, all of that we have to verify that it hasn't been taken out of context. This brings us to the question, why are we asking for the policy change? This is really about the volume of work. It's about the time that we are spending on the political columns and the subsequent letters of the editor. Just so you guys have an understanding, the news receives on average 1,300 emails every single week. We are editing and processing 166 articles and letters, 47 photos. We are designing and selling over 240 ads total and designing 60 pages every single week. Most articles and letters take 15 minutes to edit, fact check, and process. Our pages take between 20 and 30 minutes to design. The political columns are taking us 2 hours each to edit and to fact check. So it is considerably more than the other content that goes into the paper. To also give you an idea of the context for the time put into the politics that are going in the Rossmore News. This occurred during the current column hiatus, so no columns were running. One of the clubs in Rossmore decided to buy 2 political issue ads, which were permitted under the GRF policy. Both of those ads had to be fact-checked. After they ran, the calls, the emails, the letters, the in-person meetings, in 1 month's time, 29 hours of work. I did track it because I could see right off the bat just how bad it was going to be. That's 29 hours for 2 ads. The other thing that is important to keep in mind is that we are a high revenue generating department. We make $1 million every year on our advertising revenue. We have to put the time into that because what that adds up to is almost $13 a month per manor on savings for the coupon. The Rossmore News is also responsible for a lot more than just the newspaper. We manage the 3 websites, including all of the customer support for the resident portal. We maintain an FAQ site so that the staff who are working front desks can answer residents' calls when they come into those desks. We answer all the general inquiries that come in from prospective buyers. We produce 3 special sections, plus the all-around Rossmore residents guide that came out last year. We assist with internal staff messaging, communication with external media. We are the ones who also handle the external advertising for Rossmore. We have a staff representative on the marketing task force, and when the marketing plan is put into place, it will be my department that's responsible for making sure that plan happens. We sell the advertising that goes on the bus, and I want to be very clear, we do not produce the phone book, but we do deliver it. There is a petition that's been mentioned a couple of times here today during the residents' forum that was delivered to the GRF board, and a copy came to my office. I want to clarify a couple of things that are on that petition. It states that even the New York Times contains op-eds with factual errors. Just to be clear, the New York Times still fact checks. every single guest writer that submits an essay must annotate it with citations to their fact-checking sources. It doesn't mean errors won't still get in, but they're still going through that process. It's the exact same process that we do at the newspaper. Rossmore News editors were directed to, quote, exclude the political columns and political discussion in letters and event announcements. I want to be very clear. What we're talking about is politics in the column. Event announcements are fact-based. It's when the clubs are going to hold the events and what are going to happen there. And our political clubs are still allowed to publish those event announcements. We're only talking about political in the opinion columns. Quote, fact-checking has been successfully done for over 30 years prior to the banning. So the formal fact-checking that we have in place now, that was actually established 2 years ago by the GRF Policy Committee and then approved by the board. I've also had lengthy conversations with the former editor about what fact-checking used to be like versus now. Here's the reality. We live in a world where there is a lot more misinformation. Online is a hotbed for that. To give you an example of what we are now facing in terms of why things are so time-consuming and challenging with fact-checking, it starts with the fact that we don't even know anymore who the trustworthy sites are for fact-checking. So our vice presidential candidate actually told CNN regarding his spreading reports that Haitian residents in Ohio were eating pets, quote, if I have to create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do. He outright admitted he was lying. But how are we supposed to know that? In the 2023 Dominion lawsuit, Fox News' lawyers said that any reasonable person should have known that the host's statements were loose and figurative. Well, we didn't know that. We've been using Fox News as a fact-checking source from day one. False information regarding Hurricane Helene had to actually lead FEMA to create a hurricane rumor response webpage so they could get real information out there. A lot of people ask me, why are you even bothering to fact check to begin with? It's because our credibility and our reputation is on the line. Look what's going on with Facebook right now. They decided not to fact check, and they are facing a considerable backlash because of that. We do have to take into consideration our advertisers. They do not tell us what to put into the newspaper. We make that decision through the policy as a staff. But I have had 20 advertisers come to me when we were at the height of some of these political columns starting to walk a fine line, asking us, what is the limit between what is real and what is misinformation? They don't want their businesses associated with misinformation. I could assure them that that was not happening because we're fact-checking. If we don't fact-check, I'm telling you now, we are going to lose some of our advertisers. That will jeopardize our $1 million in revenue. There are also quite a few columnists, unfortunately, who still don't understand what the fact-checking sources are. And so I was getting many columns that still did not have those sources. That results in a lot of back and forth emails to try to get what it is that we need. Here's the other one. I've heard this a lot. Don't worry, just let the mistakes get in. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal. Our residents respond to every mistake that accidentally gets past us. We had one mistake that got into a letter to the editor. I got 37 emails about it. 16 submitted letters to the editor, 3 of which actually published. This is an example of some of the problems that we've faced with the political columns since we made the last change in 2023 to the policy. The biggest one is plagiarism. A lot of people, a lot of writers just do not understand that if they take something from another newspaper or another magazine, they have to put it in direct quotes. They have to cite where it came from. If they didn't, they're stealing it from that publication. We have a lot of quotes that are improperly quoted from other publications. I actually had a writer tell me once, oh, but I could say it better. Well, don't put it in direct quotes. That's not what the other publication said. We have had columns that are based off of blogs and YouTube videos that are not credible sources. We have, as I mentioned before, had columns come in without the fact-checking sources that I need, or they come in with no hyperlinks, so I have no idea how to actually fact-check them. We have had violations of the GRF policy in columns. I had one column submitted that criticized Rossmore clubs. I had another that was a line-by-line rebuttal of a column, and those actually go in letters to the editor. But the biggest one that I face every single week is the excessive emails in which they want to debate what is factually right or wrong and demanding to know why I published something. This is the other reason why fact-checking is important. These are some examples of mistakes that were actually submitted in columns. Someone called basketball player Brittany Griner transgender. She's not. One column said that Kamala Harris was in a, quote, clandestine extramarital affair with then Mayor Willie Brown. Actually, it was an open relationship, and it was a year before he was the mayor. We had a column that was 3/4 of the sentence in the column were copied verbatim from a New York Times article. By the way, the New York Times loves to go and sue people who plagiarize them. The starting fine is $550. That's plagiarism, outright plagiarism. We had another where a government program, the name was put in all capital letters, which made it look official. That's the mistake that got by our staff, and that's the one that resulted in the 16 letters to the editor, including the 3 that published. Here's my favorite, because a lot of media got caught in this trap, where they wrote that President Trump called the rioting neo-Nazis in Charlottesville very fine people. What they did is they took off the second part of the quote where he said, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and white supremacists because they should be condemned totally. If you don't put an entire quote, you can completely take a quote out of context. And the last one, stating that courts ruled in favors of states denying gender-affirming care for youths. In actuality, that's what the lower courts did, but the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals reversed that decision. So I had an entire column based on a lower court decision when a higher court had overturned it. The other factor that came in as part of our decision to make this recommendation to pull the political columns from the Rossmore News is the fact that there are other avenues in which this political opinion can get out there. We're not just talking about the club's newsletters and their websites, but that is obviously a way that they can disseminate it. We're also talking about all of these online platforms that exist where they can share that material. Removing the exception also would not eliminate all of the opinion columns in the newspaper. So we would still have columns that can have Rossmore Life, Rossmore Interests, Senior Living, or personal stories. So Bill Leary, Eleanor Vincent, they both write under those topics. We have some diverse voices columns that come in from residents that also cover things like Rossmore Life and personal stories. As you write it, we get a lot of columns from residents about Rossmore Life and personal stories. And Earth Matters, which is one of the columns that is allowed to, or has been allowed to have politics in their columns, they actually wrote 3 that were about Rossmore and contain no politics. So they would still be allowed to have submitted those columns under the revised policy. There's one other policy change that we are requesting, and that is to take out the part for political advertising that can be purchased by groups supporting or opposing public issues. That's the example I told you about earlier, those 2 ads, the 29 hours, that's what these were. We are talking about a small percentage of ads, a small amount of money that would be impacted. The majority of our ads are these, and they would still be able to run. It's ads from political candidates. It's endorsements from clubs for those candidates. It's measures and propositions that are on the ballot. And the last one, political clubs can still put membership drives in the newspaper. That's not politics, that's a club ad. The only last thing I wanted to bring up is because I know a lot of people keep talking about how what we're trying to do is censor the divisive speech, the divisive opinion, the political rancor here in Rossmore. I just want to state up front, I would continue to run these columns if we could find a way to make them manageable within the time. We are spending a considerable amount of time and staff resources on these columns. And every time we've come before you, we've tried to come up with a solution that would allow us to manage that time better so that we could keep them in the paper. We did that again this time. last year, as things were ratcheting up for me with the marketing initiatives and the columns and the letters were getting bad again, I shifted some of the managing editor work over to the assistant managing editor. He did that job for 3 months before we finally promoted him because he had to keep doing that job, and he was doing it really well. Unfortunately, within 2 months of shifting that work over, I was right back to 12 and 14-hour days. I had one column, I just want to give you an example so you can see how bad it can be. One column generated 15 email exchanges. I had to work 2 nights in a row until midnight trying to help get this column ready for publication. I finally said, that's it, we're pulling it. The club submitted a brand new column the next day and I had to start the process all over again. At the end of the day, we had to make a very hard choice as a staff to step back and ask ourselves, were we doing the right thing for this community by devoting so much time and effort to the political columns and the letters to the editor? And here's the reality. You're talking about 5% of the content in the newspaper. I can't come in here and fiscally be responsible by asking you to please give us more staff time so that we can continue these columns and letters when they are only 5% of the content of the newspaper. The responsible thing here is to say that we've reached a point where we need to end them. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions for Ann? Dwight.
Ann, we feel your pain, and we appreciate all that you do. Thank you.
And
explain, if I could, Mary. So I think I read this correctly. There will still be a political section, that articles can still be submitted to the political section?
There's no political section. What I was saying is that the political clubs here in Rossmore, so we have several political clubs here in Rossmore, they are still allowed to submit articles that have event announcements. So the Republican Club, the Democrats Club, they hold meetings, they hold dinners, they hold big events where politicians may be coming in. We still run articles about those events, but articles don't contain opinion. What we're talking about here is taking the political opinion out of the Rossmore News. Those political club news stories will not be impacted by this. Now, the one clarification with that, if you try to slide political commentary in there, we will take it out. But that's been the policy long-standing, and that predates me.
Mary.
And can you estimate what it would cost in terms of additional staff to make sure that fact-checking was done properly? Given the volume, what would it cost residents?
I wish that I could give you an actual number for that, but you don't know until the column comes in what you're looking at. There are some columnists, I feel very sorry for them, who get a column to me and it is exactly what you need. It takes that 2 hours and you move on. And it is a well thought out, well supported column. So if you get a letter to the editor or two, they also tend to be well thought out as well. The problem becomes when they don't have the necessary information, when the facts are wrong, and you have to start that back and forth exchange. Or when you have a very divisive issue that now generates 20 to 30 letters, all of which are trying to counterpoint with facts, and most of the other residents don't understand they have to provide fact-checking sources. So now I'm in a back and forth email exchange. If I let a column get in that's particularly divisive, my phone and my emails blow up, I have to respond to all of those. I do believe that it is my job to respond to every resident who reaches out to me. I have had times where I have had to tell people no to in-person meetings because I just don't have the time. So in a given week, if everything runs exactly as it should, it's just 2 hours of work. But in a week where a column, and I'm saying again, half the columns had this problem, it can be 20 to 30 hours of extra work. That's almost another full-time employee. So you're talking probably about $45,000 to $60,000 more a year.
Mary, here's an extension of your question. So we as a board, would we be willing to charge at least $1 or more to the coupon to pay for an employee to handle just the political columns? That really is what it boils down to. Any other questions for Ann? Maxine?
This is another one that I'm glad it's your job and not mine. Under the current policy and what we're talking about, is there any way that a political organization can submit opinions? Is there any other avenue within Rossmore other than their own newsletters?
Not that I know of. I mean, under the current policy, obviously, the Democrats Club has a column and the Republican Club has a column. If we accept the change, then no, they would not have access to the newspaper for that. In terms of Rossmore, actual Rossmore amenities that might make that available to them for political opinion, no. They have their own websites, they have their own newsletters, but we don't run anything else in here that would be able to take that political commentary.
And one more piece to that question. If we change this policy in the next reading to end political columns, that's a for now, right? And that there is a possibility if things change in the future that either by staff or the world changes or there are more, I don't know, more ways to communicate, that then there might be a possibility for people to express their opinions and have them seen by many.
That's correct. At any point in time, policy committee could bring this back up and rediscuss it. And if the committee decided to recommend to the board and the board decided to adopt it, at any time you can put anything, you can make any changes to policy 601.2 to change the type of coverage that's happening in the newspaper.
I would encourage groups that are interested in that type of political debate to investigate the 22 options that are out there about forums and avenues for debate. Paper is an old, archaic medium, no offense, Ann. And the Rossmore News obviously has many restrictions on what can and cannot be published in a political column. If one were to use something online and have a moderator, there would be no restriction on speech. You could have an open debate. As an example, you could have a subreddit for just Rossmore, and you could debate issues to your heart's content with virtually no restriction depending on the moderator. This medium is not, paper medium is not to your advantage. And the world is debating issues left and right online. And if you haven't seen it, there's amazing freedom online. So I would just ask that they investigate some of those things that are listed by Ann. They're very effective and well accepted. Any other question? Dwight?
So I'm troubled. I mean, it's a 25-year tradition that newspaper has been available for this. When we struck a compromise under Maxine's leadership on the policy committee, it was for one political column per week, and it was involving the clubs in helping to be the clearinghouse to make that happen. So what you're telling me that has not worked, and is that because the clubs did not function as what we thought as a clearinghouse, or what? And really, we're just talking about the two political columns, right? We're just talking about the Republicans and the Democrats.
No, we're not. The alternative voices has been equally bad because that's opened up to all residents. So there's no club. There's no filter before it gets to me.
Right.
It goes back to what I was saying. Fact checking is very, very difficult. How do you know what is a trustworthy website? How do you know? I mean, if you're one of the club representatives who's reading another writer's thing and you're checking those facts as you go through, you might think, oh, it looks good to me. When it gets to me, I'm pulling it up and saying, you got the quote wrong. Or I run all articles through a plagiarism checker. and it comes back and highlights everything. There's no way for the club representative to know that that was pulled from a publication and it wasn't properly cited. It's very difficult to ask people who are not professional journalists, who are not trained in this business, to do the job of an editor. But what I will say is the difference that I do see with some of the club columns versus alternative voices, there actually was a layer that was clearly happening there. There were some people who were checking before it got to me, because those were cleaner than alternative voices that had no filter at all.
One more emotional question. So the election last fall was very divisive, and obviously public forums are very much a part of that. Are we reacting to that divisive environment in this policy change?
The only thing I'll say is this is my third time in front of you in 6 years. We hit this every single time we hit the mid-year elections and we hit the presidential elections. So we want to wait a few months, bring them back, and then come back and have this conversation again in 2 years. And I will admit, part of this is my fault. I allow the work to get out of hand. I do have to stop working until midnight. I get that. I try to go as far as I can. We did, as a staff, try to figure out, could we move work around so that we could keep these? Again, that's where I finally had to do that step back and say, look, I'm not just a 32-year journalist anymore. I work in a community where I do work for the residents, all of them. It's their coupon money. I have a responsibility to say, are we utilizing our staff resources so that they're getting their money's worth? And again, that's when I took that step back and said, we're talking about 5% of the content in the newspaper. And this is not an easy choice. I have never advocated for censorship ever in a newspaper, but I understand my role is much bigger than that. And so again, I said to myself, no, it is not worth the time and staff resources we're putting into this for 5% of the content in the paper.
I have to agree with that. She's talking about a normal article taking 15 minutes. A political column takes 2+ hours. I think the residents need to know that their coupon money is being spent for opinion in the Rossmore News, not for facts, not for reporting, but for someone's opinion. Is that the best, most efficient use of coupon money? We're elected to be fiscally responsible. I don't see it as being fiscally responsible, that we're spending an inordinate amount of time in a publication on someone's opinion. She's gone through this 3 times. I don't think it's related to the current state of affairs, but I think it's something we have to look at financially.
Yeah. I like very much what you brought to my attention, and perhaps more people in Rossmore could be brought to their attention, that there are very many other ways of communicating opinions that are supported and they're exterior to the newspaper. My suspicion is that a lot of people in Rossmore are not aware of these mechanisms. So perhaps without changing our coupon, we could make them aware of other mechanisms of expressing opinions when that is the purpose of what these sites stand for.
I think we also need to consider marketing. Maybe the marketing task force needs to talk about this. How does dissension in letters on a column, how does that aid marketing? Does it? I doubt it. And if we're working toward improving the image of marketing in Rossmore, I think we need to consider that as well. Any other comments?
Yeah.
Maxine.
A couple of people have also indicated that why can't we just put a disclaimer that, and I know you've addressed this before, I just think at this point of this conversation it might be something very important. Why can't we just put a disclaimer that these are the opinions of the writer and whatever else a journalist would say?
This is why. This slide right here. These are the kinds of egregious mistakes that are getting through, and if we just decide to make it the wild, wild west, we just slap the Rossmore News on some really bad stuff. Do we want to pay the $550 fine because we plagiarized the New York Times? Do we want to be known as the newspaper that plagiarized the New York Times? Again, I keep coming back to the fact that I have a very big responsibility to the residents' coupon. We've worked very hard. When I came in here, we made $650,000 in revenue for advertising. We're now at $1 million. I take it very seriously that every penny we raise brings down that coupon cost for the residents. This would, if we decide to do a free-for-all, those 20 advertisers, and those are just the 20 that came to talk to me, are going to think twice about whether or not they want to be associated with a newspaper that is openly said, just like Facebook, we're not going to fact check anymore. We're just going to let it go through. Yes, you can make that decision, but I just want to put everybody on notice that I do believe that will impact our revenue.
And if I understand you correctly, it's more than just revenue. We could actually be liable for posting something in our newspaper that was not, even if it was under an opinion column.
Yes, even under an opinion column, and let me be really clear, if you make a mistake in opinion column, that doesn't necessarily have legal ramifications. What I'm talking about is actual plagiarism. If you go and verbatim lift sentences that were written in another publication and you pass it off as your own, that is plagiarism. And we are now, our newspaper is online as well. I have seen it happen. There are internet trolls out there, that's what they look for. They find it, they bring it to the New York Times, they get a finder's fee, usually 10%, and then the New York Times gets all that other money. We have this with photos as well. You can't just lift a photo off the internet and plop it into your newspaper and call it your own. There are copyright rules. There's been clubs in here that have actually gotten fined because they put it on their own website and they didn't own the rights to the photo. So that's the line that I walk when we're talking about legal implication, is making sure that we are not taking something from another copyrighted source and putting it in our paper as if it's ours.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Ann. As this is first reading, we'll take this up again in February.
At this point, can we do a little calendar check here, or agenda check on time? We have the room until 1 o'clock, and it's noon right now. As far as items on the agenda, we do would like to have the machinery and equipment item considered, and then we do need approval of the calendar of events. The other items are kind of at your discretion of what you'd like to hear within that time frame we have the room for.
Okay, let's go on to item 10A, which is the machinery and equipment.
Okay, so for the machinery and equipment, we are here for the second reading of that budget. We presented that in December to you. The list of equipment is included in the budget. This is coming from the Trust Estate Fund. The specific list of items, we can certainly answer any questions, but this is equipment such as vehicles or such as permanent fixture equipment that we need in order to maintain the infrastructure here or continue operations. These are pieces of equipment that are over $5,000 and have a life expectancy over a year. If there's any questions on specific items, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, this is a second reading, so any other questions? Cheryl?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the machinery and equipment budget for 2025. Do I need to specify the amount?
Is there a second?
No.
Mary seconds it.
Thank you.
Discussion? Okay, Deborah, roll call, please.
Absolutely. Hamaji?
Yes.
Hines?
Yes.
Hopper?
Yes.
Church?
Yes.
Huntley?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Lair,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
and Yin.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Okay, thank you. We'll jump ahead to make sure we get 11E voted on. So Deborah, did you or Jeff want to give an intro to that?
I'm good. I could give an overview of that particular item. So on an annual basis, the board approves the calendar of events for the GRF election, which includes the GRF annual meeting of members, which is held in May. This calendar includes such information as the dates that announcements regarding the election of district directors will be published in the Rossmore News. The date nominating petitions will be available for interested candidates, and the deadline date for returning them along with candidate statements. The date candidate statements and ballots will be mailed to district members. The deadline dates for receipt of the ballots and the date the election inspection company report the ballot count, and the date of the annual meeting. So I'm asking the board to approve this listing as attached in the packet.
Any questions for Deborah? Okay, is there a motion?
I'd like to make that motion. I move to approve the calendar events for the 61st annual meeting of members as included in the packet.
Okay, is there a second? Carol seconds it. Is there any discussion? Okay, roll call, please, Deborah.
Certainly. Hamaji?
Yes?
Hines?
Yes.
Hopper?
Yes.
Hurt?
Yes.
Bentley?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Blair?
Yes.
Walker?
Yes.
Yin.
Yes.
Unanimous.
Okay, thank you. I would like to move on to 11A, the update on NetSuite.
Can we
Oh, I'm sorry.
do 10B?
Which one?
10B, the introduction of so we can get a first reading of the
Oh,
capital.
I'm sorry, skipped ahead. Okay. Jeff, could you introduce that?
Okay, so we have been working with the Planning Committee and the Finance Committee, and we introduced this as an overview to the board in December on the capital budget for 2025. This is the budget that comes from the Trust Estate Fund, which is made up primarily of the membership transfer fee revenue. The list of projects in your packet is either described individually, but if we can go to the 5-year capital budget, go to the next one. Not that one, then there you go, perfect. So what we're looking at here is the list of projects. They are prioritized as well. We have many projects that are carryover from current year and actually been ongoing for a number of years. So we have the carryover amount and additional funding requested to bring the total 2025 request. Since the Planning Committee looked at this, they had some adjustments, and that was to bring the pavement program down to $900,000. When we presented this to you, it was slightly over $1 million. The food and beverage originally was $250,000. We brought that down to $200,000. We reduced the lawn bowling study. We had originally put in an amount in there to complete a master plan. We brought that down a bit and split it over 2 years. And then we also had some adjustment to the project as we have a little more information for the front entry gate generator replacement project. At this point, all of these numbers are based on kind of our best estimate and information for closeout of 2024, so what it would be carried forward, and estimates for revenue for 2025. If you can go back then, Gerald, to that other slide. There we go. As you can see on this one, we have made some assumptions that is still under consideration with finance, and that is the number of units. This is based on 400 MTFs. Previously, we're looking at 375. This is still being discussed at finance, and they will have a recommendation for you in February. We have also continued with the $13,500 as the membership transfer fee and the escalation as the current approval is to go up $500 annually. There is discussion at finance about that rate and should it be increased in 6 months, as Dan had mentioned. We are also going under the assumption that we continue with the available cash balance being a minimum of $2 million, and that we continue with the reserve in the capital budget of $3.75 million in 2025 and increasing that to $4 million in 2026, and then maintaining that at a $4 million level moving forward. So as presented, this budget accomplishes that. However, it should be noted that we don't have full numbers or list of projects for 2026 and beyond. One of the main projects that the board has been talking about is in the facilities master plan is replacement of MOD. That is a huge project that will need to be considered and discussed separately. And one of the things finance will be talking about next month, starting the conversation a little bit more, is how those types of projects could be included. So at this point, we're asking for a first reading based on this information. This will then still continue to go through planning and finance and back to you for final adoption consideration in February.
Right.
So just a quick question. So some changes, revisions were made because we weren't hitting that target of $2 million, and now it's a little bit better. So can numbers change in the interim here for next month's meeting based on what finance says and what the planning committee says?
So numbers may change, but I think what we're looking for is confirmation to keep that minimum $2 million and to keep the reserve growing to 3.75. And then based on that, once we have final closeout numbers from 24 and carry into 25, and if any numbers we get better information on, we'll continue to tweak those a little bit. But the basic premise is this is the list of projects that the board would approve.
Sorry. Any further questions? Okay, so it's our understanding this is, because the data was changed, this is going back to finance.
Well, it will continue to be discussed at planning and finance as we refine things, but it'll come back to you as a final reading in February for your consideration.
All right, thank you very much. Now, Todd, would you be open? Thank you for being flexible. Give us your NetSuite update if you could.
Well, we've been talking about this for a long time now, and I think this is start off that we are live. And I think that really can't be overstated enough, the effort it took to get us live in January. You know, this is a huge undertaking for this whole organization. It's not just finance, it's not just replacing our accounting software, it really is a enterprise-wide solution, right? And so it is taking years and years and years of different databases and combining them. And so the fact that we're live, we're actually in the production environment with the, and we've talked in the past, you know, this is a phased rollout, so we are going to be turning on other components within the, we'll call the NetSuite environment, which includes the field service management module, which is basically replacing how we currently take in all the work orders. It's going to be bringing in budget and financing, or budgeting and financial planning piece in March, getting ready for the budget season. So as we roll these new processes on, we have a team that is learning the software for the first time as well. And so I actually am very encouraged. We do have, and will continue to have some, no implementation of this scope will ever go 100% smoothly. There will be unforeseen hiccups. We did have one in January with the ACH, or the direct debits from people's accounts. That was an unforeseen underlying database issue where owners that have multiple residences within the valley kind of broke the system for the whole, and we didn't see how that actually kind of came into the system. And so we're dealing with, very, very complex. I think people forget, even though, we're on a day-to-day basis, but we're closing 44 separate entities every month, right? We have over basically 130 to 140 bank accounts. All that has to talk together in one way. And so we have done the workarounds on that. But if you think about, an owner can be an entity, it can be it can be a trust. That trust can have beneficiaries. That owner could have multiple residents. He could live in one. He might not live in one. He may live in multiple, or he might own multiples and live in one. And so there was some, I would say, an unforeseen, hiccup on the direct debits. We did get those fixed in their process, and won't be a problem for February. I just want to let everyone know that there will be some, unforeseen. This is a huge undertaking. And one of the things we're going to really do going forward, I just want the board to know, is when something happened like this, we realized there wasn't really an effective way just immediately, unless you went to Nixle, to get out to let everyone know. And so we're going to do a couple things. We're going to produce a NetSuite news update on rossmore.com and rossmorenews.com. I'll be updating that on a frequent basis. We're also going to have, in the first week in the paper of every month, a NetSuite news article that kind of highlights what we're doing, is just not just for problems, but also successes as we roll out through the year what we're doing. And then we're also going to bring in I would say, a NetSuite hotline. And so it'll be also published in the paper next week, and also in the NetSuite news, where I'm going to leave a message that basically, if something affects a resident or a member, there's a concern, and if there's an update I need to get out to the community, like the delay in the coupon payment, I will leave a message. And so if someone is a resident in the community sees something that they're concerned about, they can dial that number, which will be the 925-988-7878, which will publish. And if there's something that I need to communicate immediately regarding the NetSuite implementation that impacts the community, I will leave a message on that line. So it'll be just an outbound only, but we're going to try to get ahead of the communication, not just for any kind of issues, but I think also just as we undertake this together for the rest of the year and really refine this. We have staff that are learning it. We're all in the production environment now, and it's an exciting time, but it's also, as we all know, a very huge undertaking. And so I'm very encouraged where we are. I didn't obviously foresee the one issue, but we're live. We're going to be turning on some other features for the next couple of months, including the work order system, our new advanced, more AP three-way matching system, purchase orders, all that is going to come online. So really exciting. We are still obviously looking at phase 2, sourcing some of the eventual reservation and other, integrated solutions, and we'll keep you guys updated on that. But we're here and we're live, and it's everyone has their sleeves rolled up. So I just want to let everyone know that, if we just continue on this, we're going to see a wildly different system, in the next 3 to 4 months as we move forward. So.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Any questions for Todd? Dwight.
Just a marketing task force input for you. The title of this slide is GRF NetSuite. Think about what residents see or think. This is a Rossmore system, right? And so I just encourage you to NetSuite, nobody knows what NetSuite is. I could care less what NetSuite is. How does it impact me as a resident?
Yeah.
Just my feedback.
Okay, great.
Any other questions? Thanks, Todd.
You bet.
And because being short on time here, I'd like to jump, and Deborah, I apologize for all the jumping around, but I'd like to move on to 11C1 about the ABC research that we've done recently. Jeff, if you could present that.
Okay, we're always finding hot items in Rossmore to talk about, and ABC regulations is certainly one of them that is impacting not just clubs, but also events that Golden Rain, Rossmore, Walnut Creek sponsors as well. So this is some of the information that we have been working on to provide to the clubs. This is an ongoing process. I know the clubs are desperately looking for options and information. We are doing the same and hope to continue to provide information in a collaborative fashion. Basically, per California Business and Professions Code, an event is not a private event if alcohol is considered sold, if there are indirect sales such as admission fees or donations. If the premises are open to the public, it is not a private event. Alcohol is directly sold or donations accepted. So one of the main things that we've been dealing with is if you are having a private event, then an ABC license is not required. And everything we kind of feel like we're doing behind closed gates for our residents and members would meet the definition of a private event. But as we have really dug into this, the definition of a private event is not one that has any type of monetary consideration whatsoever. So a ticketed event, you take donations for drinks, you have a raffle. Anytime you have an event where there is any type of monetary consideration, it no longer meets the definition of a private event, even though it's behind the gates and in our private community. So for a private event, again, it has to be invited guests only, and there's no monetary consideration. And alcohol is basically provided by the host at their expense. So some of the liability impacts, one of the reasons why this is so critical is that there is liability involved. If there is an event that takes place and it is not in compliance with the law, there is certainly exposure. And if there is knowingly violations of the law, then there definitely is liability. People ask, well, we do have liability coverage. Insurance will not kick in to the degree, potentially, may not kick in, if you knowingly are in violation of the law. So we want that coverage to take place, so we want to be in compliance with the law. There is liability for clubs and officers, personal liability for board members, personal liability for directors and officers. There are fines up to $5,000 and hopefully no imprisonment. So a few scenarios that we've talked about where maybe a permit might be required or not. So a scenario, we have a bocce tournament is held at Sportsman's Park where an entry fee is charged for prize money. The event is bring your own bottle. ABC response is if participants are paying an entry fee, it is not considered a private event and a license would be required. There's a concert going on. Someone brings a drink to the event center during a concert where a paid ticket is required. So the concert goer would need to be asked to go dump out their container. If the participants are allowed to bring their own bottle, then there would be a permit required. There is a bring your own bottle or drinks for personal consumption. So a club allows alcohol to be brought strictly for personal consumptions, not shared with others, and there is no cost to attend the event and no money is exchanged. This is an example of a private event and no license would be required. So what if annual dues cover the cost of events? So a club includes the cost of attending events in their annual dues, and there is no exchange of money to attend the event or at the event itself. So a club can include the cost of attending events in their annual dues as long as it is not specifically for providing alcohol. Membership dues can cover events generally, but cannot explicitly mention alcohol as part of the fee. And I'm going to expand on that here in a minute. Alcohol service policy options. So these are kind of a list. This is not an exhaustive list of options, but this is a list of options that clubs can consider. They can host dry events where no alcohol is included. They can hire a catering company that holds the appropriate license to serve alcohol. And there are numerous catering companies that have a Type 58 license, and I'll show you a list, that can provide alcohol service for clubs. They can have no monetary exchange associated with the event itself, and therefore it meets the definition of private. They can include an activities fee in their monthly, quarterly, or annual dues that covers the cost of all club-sponsored activities where a ticket price would normally be charged. Or they can apply for a one-day permit from ABC. So licensed catering for alcohol, you can hire a licensed caterer, ensure that the caterer holds a valid ABC Type 58 catering permit, require proof of liability insurance, including alcohol coverage, include the GRF and the club as additionally insured parties on the caterer's policy. This is all kind of routine steps that we work with caterers on. Licensed caterer ensures compliance with regulations, including preventing over-serving and underage drinking. That is part of the RBS certification that they are required to have staffing that meets that requirement, and they do in order to have a Type 58 license. So some of the benefits is it minimizes the liability for not only GRF, but the clubs as well, and ensures compliance with ABC regulations. This is a partial list. This list comes from the ABC website of caterers in this region that hold a Type 58 license. So if you go on ABC website, you can look for businesses that hold licenses and particular types of licenses, and it will filter it for you. So these are the list that is on their website. Many of these caterers already perform service. Now we understand completely that this is going to cost. A caterer is not going to serve alcohol or use their license that costs them money for free. So there is a cost. That cost varies per individual. So that may be a deterrent for some clubs to use a caterer and their license because of the cost. As I mentioned before, you can include the cost of all club activities in monthly, quarterly, or annual dues. So for example, a current practice of a club typically is a club collects annual dues at the beginning of the year. Those annual dues pay for such things as club operations, supplies, insurance, maybe bank charges. The club then charges an admission ticket or fee for activities to cover the cost of specific activities. A dinner dance may have a ticket price of $30 per person that the club charges. So an optional alternative would be that the club collects dues annually for the club operations, but then collects activity dues monthly, quarterly, or annually for functions scheduled during that time period. A club does not charge for the individual activities scheduled for the month or quarter. So you collect I'll get a little more specific. So for example, Gen X Club has annual dues of $25 to cover general club operations. For the month of February, Gen X Club is going to have a Super Bowl potluck. They're going to have a dinner dance, and they're going to have a bocce tournament. So under the original format, they would collect their dues of $25 beginning at the beginning of the year. The Super Bowl potluck that they were having is a free event. They're not charging anything to attend. A ticket is required for their dinner dance, costing $30 per person. Tickets are sold prior to the event or to interested club members or at the door. For the bocce tournament, members must register in advance and pay an entry fee of $25. The cost for a member to participate in all three events is $55 plus their annual dues. Under this other format, annual dues of $25 are paid at the beginning of the year. Activity dues are collected at the beginning of each month or quarter for club-sponsored events scheduled during that time. So for this specific example, the activity dues for February would be $55 for this club. No individual fees would be collected for the 3 club events. If the club member is out of town or does not plan to attend the monthly club-sponsored events, they simply don't pay the activities dues for that month. This does require some members to do some spreadsheet work, and they need to do some announcements. But you'll notice in the new format, there's no discussion of this is so you get a bottle of wine at your table, this is so you can have drinks at the bar. It's simply we collect $55 for those events, whether they have alcohol or not. So there has been discussion about an option for GRF to secure a Type 51 club license for each of the clubhouse facilities. This is a model that is used by Laguna Woods down south currently. So GRF would need to conduct the service of alcohol for the events. All servers and bartenders would need to be RBS certified. Clubs would be charged a fee to cover all operating costs associated with the service. So whatever it costs us for the alcohol, whatever it costs us for the staffing, for all of the associated costs, we would pass along. Just for some context, the minimum charge for the service in Laguna Woods is $150 per event. So GRF could not transfer use of the license to a club. So we couldn't say that the Gen X Club wants to rent Hillside, so we would transfer use of the license to them. They would take on the liability. You can't do that. If a club wanted to have their own event and not use Rossmore, the GRF license, GRF would need to close down our license and our operation for that rental, and then the club would need to itself meet all of the ABC regulations. Basically, if it's a private event, they wouldn't need a license, but if it was a non-private event, they would need to get their own license or have a contractor perform that.
Question, Jeff. You said close down the license. What does that mean?
So we couldn't simultaneously
operate. Use the Dobla room for an example. We closed the license down for there. What does that mean?
So we couldn't operate anything to do with our serving alcohol through the GRF license. So we would basically it would be up to them to complete the licensing or whatever requirements were.
And when we have a license for that license that you were talking about for all the properties, do we have to address that license to particular spots?
So you would need a license specific to each location. So we would have to have one for Hillside, one for Gateway, one for the event center.
Okay, so we have the license for, I want to make sure I understand the shutdown. So when you say, if we have a license for there and they say we don't want to use it, they have to get their own license for that facility. Mm-hmm. And so how does that affect it if we got now 2 licenses on the same address and so I'm trying to understand, when you say shutdown, do we got to say we no longer have a license here for this night and they have to get their own license? And then we have to reinstate our license?
No, you don't have to reinstate the license. It's just we wouldn't operate under that license. So it would be like you're open for business, we're closed for business, and now the rental is open for business.
Can I just clarify that? So we have 3 licenses: Hillside, Event Center, and Creekside. So if somebody rents the Diablo room for their own event, we can still function in the other 2 locations with the license?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. How much is a license?
It depends on the type of license. They have an initial cost of, I believe these are $1,200 or around there. It depends on a number of factors. And then there's an annual cost of about $800 to renew it per license.
Per address? Per location.
Yeah. So it's a nominal cost, that portion of it, really. But there is a cost. So then there is another option where we can have a food and beverage operator, and a number of properties do this, where they have a food and beverage operator and they hold the license for the events, similar to Creekside at Creekside Clubhouse. And then they are responsible for all the alcohol consumption at that place. You would have to contact them, schedule the service, and work through that with the food and beverage operator. So just to give you a scenario, if GRF did secure a Club 51 license for, say, Hillside Clubhouse, and the Gen X Club makes a reservation for their annual gala with alcohol service and charges an admission fee, GRF operates the bar with RBS certified staff. The club can pay a flat fee to GRF to cover staffing and alcohol, or they could opt for an open bar where members purchase drinks directly from the bar. In that scenario, if the bar sales cover costs, there's no additional charge to the club. But if not, then there would be an additional charge to cover the remaining balance. No additional liability for GRF, the board, trust, or the clubs, as all actions comply with code, and our $50 million liability coverage would apply.
Jeff, but that means we'd be kind of in the catering business or in the drinking business.
We would be in the bar business.
In the bar business. Yeah. I knew there was a better word. Thanks. He
And
always
just
has
to
a better
verify,
word.
the staff would be GRF staff.
The
it would
staff
not
would
be a
be-
club member who was licensed.
Yes, good point. That would be GRF staff. We would have to hire the staff. They would probably be part-time on call. Depending on the number of events in a given day, week, we would schedule those folks to work. It cannot be volunteers. It cannot be club volunteers. GRF does not meet and is not a registered 501c3. We are not a 501c anything. We are a nonprofit mutual benefit corporation. We are not tax exempt. We just don't have a tax burden. So we do not qualify for any of the benefits of being a 501c that can use volunteers under certain circumstances. We have to follow the labor code, which means if we are using folks, we need to pay them at least minimum wage. There are limited opportunities where we have volunteers, and basically that is you folks serving on a board of directors or a committee that you appoint to carry out a certain function. But if they are people doing work that you normally could hire somebody for, you are in violation of labor code. So we can't use volunteers. We have to hire our own staff.
One more quickie, just for the people. If we did this, who would manage it? That would take more staff time just to manage this type of thing, as well as we're not making these rules. Can you state again who created these rules that we must follow?
So this would, just like Laguna Woods does. They have staff specific to oversee, like it is a business. We are running an additional business. So we would have to hire additional folks. As you mentioned, these are ABC rules. This is not anything that GRF is enacting. These are not part of our policies or rules. Our rules are simply that we are in compliance with the law. A quick other scenario here, a club operates the bar under GRF permit. This has come up quite a few times. What if we allow somebody to operate under our permit? So GRF secures the Type 51 permit for Hillside. The Gen X Club provides alcohol service for their annual gala with RBS certified volunteers. GRF does not staff or operate the bar, but allows the club to utilize our permit. This scenario is not permitted by ABC regulations and not advised by legal counsel. Allowing clubs to use GRF's permit exposes GRF, the board, the trust, and clubs to liability. Liability coverage may not apply in this case of an incident because we are knowingly in violation of the law. So we are continuing to look at options, opportunities. We are not trying to put up roadblocks to success. Right now, it looks like the best is for clubs or organizations to use a licensed caterer or to consider rolling their cost of their events into monthly, annual activity dues or some sort. We will continue to work with ABC to track down options, but happy to answer any questions that.
I just wanted to verify that these different options and our obligation and liability has been discussed with council, correct?
Extensively.
Okay. I also, before we get into discussion, I want to just say that we know this is important for residents, and various groups have come to us with alternatives almost daily. I've asked Jeff questions, he contacts the attorney. We are investigating things as we go almost every day. I especially want to thank the Activities Council because they did a lot of research. They spent a lot of time trying to figure out solutions, and we've met with them, and we will continue to meet with them. And I think we're going to find a workable solution eventually. But it's been a learning process, and nothing in Rossmore happens fast. So like Jeff said, clubs can look at other alternatives now while we investigate further. So any questions for Jeff? Carol.
I think this is great presentation and explanation of what's going on and what options there are. And hopefully we will be able to get this presentation so we can share it with clubs as there's, questions.
Yes, we can definitely do that. And some valuable feedback we did actually get in meeting with the Activities Council is that the clubs don't know necessarily that we are trying to work on this as well and want to partner with them. So we'll be putting together information to share with the clubs as well.
Dwight?
I think we all recognize the major concern for all the social activities that go on here. I would encourage staff to come up with a plug-and-play solution. For example, the Laguna Woods scenario. Could we get more details of what that would look like and what the obstacles would be to having that service? Just like we provide AV service, we provide all sorts of things for club room rentals. This would be an add-on. But it's not clear to me exactly what that add-on would be at this point.
I've asked for additional details on cost and projections of staff needs based on the volume of social events that would require alcohol serving. So that's going to take a little time. Yeah. Any other comments? Okay, we look forward to more information. Thank you. We have a full audience.
I don't think they're here for the board meeting. We wish.
Hang on just a moment. I don't think we have time for a deep dive.
Yeah, I think.
So I think we're going to have to move that to February. And do you have a quick review of the room reservation?
So we did have a PowerPoint. We can get a little bit more in depth next month, but instead of going through that, I could tell you that the reservation staff, including Z, the recreation manager, Kelsey, and Ann, have been working diligently on this. They have successfully placed all of the historical date reservations, and they got that out before any reservations took place for January. They are working on finalizing a few dates for the event center later in the year. Some of the challenges really have been focused on implementing the no fee, no service or type reservations, so moving people around so they can take advantage of that. We'll be implementing the plug and play for the AV systems for rentals that use rooms where they need to access AV, but it's as simple as utilizing their own laptop. So we'll be doing that where there's not a fee. They have worked to do all of the historical placements, and keep in mind that is reservations that are recurring up to 4 per week for clubs based on their actual history. So working through all of those requests took significant times. They had to filter out reservations that weren't in compliance with what a historical date was. And so they've been working through that. They've been dealing with all of the private rental requests, filling those in. And now they're really starting to tackle all of the one-off reservations. So a club wants to add a date for Thursday at 2 o'clock, but it's not a recurring date, it's just a new activity. They are working through those placements now as well. So what I would encourage clubs and residents, if you are not getting your rental agreement, if you're having issues with some of the dates, the best thing to do is come in and meet with Kelsey, meet with Z, and go through those specifically. There is a lot of email exchange that is going on with the clubs and a lot of different factors that are involved. But keep communicating, keep coming in and asking and making sure your interests are being met. But as far as the no fee, no service and the plug and play, those types of things are moving. Placement of all of the historical dates is pretty much complete with a few exceptions at the event center. So going well, and I believe once we get to next year at this time, that'll be the norm.
Any questions for Jeff?
When does the movie start? And what is the movie?
And what
Thank
is
you.
so good?
All right, at this time, I will make an announcement that there will be no mid-month meeting of the board in February, and the end-of-month regular meeting of the board will be held on Thursday, February 27th at 9 o'clock here in Peacock Hall. There will be an executive session of the board following this meeting, and we will go into recess. Thank you.